That's not part of the definition.
I never do it under oath.
Yeah.
I don't do that under oath.
Which case
I
that
know,
we're
I
in?
scared myself. I was scared to see how things were going. Thank goodness I brought
This is the one where they want to deny the uses that normally would be permitted in the business district as a compromise to have the extra parking.
Lisa Junkers?
Carol?
She just showed up. I mean, I'm assuming. Are you and Lisa going to talk a while?
Yeah, Lisa, I don't think I'm going to take that long. We'll just go ahead. You're going to do the consent docket first, right?
To answer your question, if it's an agreed to condition, we would put it into the resolution.
Okay.
If it becomes an enforcement issue, who knows where that would end up.
I'm happy to worry about that down the line.
Yes. You filled it up?
Filled out?
If you want to start sheet two,
77.
no, what, Rob?
It's like
I want to make that very clear on the record. Take your outside and talk with me.
right there.
You can have a conversation. You just can't make that comment. That's fine. That's fine. I just want to get it clear.
Like a developer.
We're going to take it outside.
But the owner of Rob Street hasn't done yet.
We called
Michael Coster?
It's not here. Yes.
Sheila Richardson? Sheila Richardson?
Good. Clear out lots of bodies real soon.
Yeah, you said? Yeah.
All right, good afternoon. We're going to come to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the April the 7th, 2015 convening of the Baltimore City Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals. Hope everyone had a pleasant Easter and happy Passover, or good Passover. Anyways, a couple of housekeeping points before we get underway. First, if you have a cell phone, a pager, anything else that makes any sort of audible electronic noise, anything that makes any chime, plays a ringtone, or the like, we ask at a minimum those be turned to a vibrate-only position, if not off. Additionally, to the extent that you need to have a conversation, we ask that you take that out the double doors to your rear. And the reason for those is quite simple. You'll note that there are a number of microphones around us up here, and those microphones are all very sensitive. They can pick up noises and conversations in the gallery. And those microphones are not only for the purpose of amplification, but also for the purpose of recording these proceedings, not just for the purposes of a transcriptionist, seated at the end of the dais, but also those of you who are forward of the wall can see that there are 3 video cameras on the wall behind you, and there are 2 video cameras on the wall behind us. These proceedings are being recorded for broadcast on the city's Charm TV network. So if you want to see your hearing on television, you can. But the point is that conversations in the gallery, cell phones, and the like noises from the gallery interfere with not just the general conduct of these proceedings, but also the recording of these proceedings. We will be voting at the end of the day on the cases which are heard today, and you're certainly more than welcome to hang out and enjoy a civics lesson. But if you've got other things to do on this otherwise decent, I guess, April afternoon, that's certainly understandable. And you can call into the zoning board office in the morning and find out how we ruled. If you take out pen and paper, I can give you the number for the zoning board office. And I'll give you a second to grab that. I'll read this number off a couple of times to give you an opportunity. But the number for the zoning board office is 410-396-4301. That's 410-396-4301. You will, however, need to wait until you receive the formal written notice or the outcome of your case, which should be forthcoming in about 3 to 4 weeks, before you're able to go and get your permits. We certainly ask that you not build in the city of Baltimore without first obtaining proper permits, that is. If you've not done so already, if you're here in opposition to any case, we ask that you please sign in on our sign-in sheet. It's being held up by Mr. French. And the purpose of the sign-in sheet is pretty simple. It allows us to know not only which cases have opposition, but also allows us to know who needs to receive those written notices I just referred to. Additionally, if your case gets postponed, we need to be able to know how to reach you to let you know when the case will be going forward. So, if you would like to receive written notices and you're here in opposition or you're here as part of any case, we ask that you please sign in on the sign-in sheet. Now, the procedure for when the cases are called will be that the appellant will come forward and they will stand to my left or your right. The opposition, if any, will also come forward at that time, and they'll be standing to my right or your left. Once everyone's up here, we'll get you sworn in, and we'll start off first with the appellant, who'll be given the opportunity to present their side of things, let us know what it is they're proposing, present any witnesses, offer any evidence, and respond to any questions from the board. Once they're done with their presentation, we'll then turn to the opposition, if any. They'll be given the opportunity to present their side of things, their witnesses, offer any evidence. And at the conclusion of their presentation, we'll go back to the appellant, who'll be given the opportunity to respond to any points brought up by the opposition and to offer a closing statement. We won't be going back and forth, keeping folks here unnecessarily later into the evening. Before we get underway with the substance of our docket, there are some cases that we have to deal with some preliminary issues on. First, 2015-69, 40 North Streeper Street, Victor Perez. Calling again, appeal number 2015-69, 40 North Streeper Street. Okay? That case has a posting issue and won't be heard today. The appellant appears not to be here, so we'll see if he comes later on. We also have some cases that are being postponed. Appeal number 2014-557, 1625 Thames Street. That case is being postponed. And 2015-59, 326 South Broadway, William Bement. That case has been postponed. All right, next there are cases on our consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of appeals where the zoning board staff has already reviewed these files and determined, and we have determined that there is a sufficient basis to grant these appeals. We'll call all the consent cases as a group. I ask that you please stay in the order in which you're called. The first person called will line up here, and everyone else will line up in a line down the dais. Once everyone's here, we'll get folks sworn in, and we'll call each case in turn, and you'll be given the opportunity then to offer any evidence at that time. 2015-38, 3315 Pulaski Highway, Yang Huang. Next is 2015-43, 877 North Howard Street, James Joseph. Next will be 2015-55, 3507 Woodland Avenue, Nathaniel Green. Together with that will be 2015-56, 3503 through 05 Woodland Avenue. Next will be 2015-57, 821 South Dean Street, Michael Coster. 2015-60, 35 South Carlton Street, Teres Hanatson. After that will be 2015-61, 711 South Clinton Street. It's also Michael Coster. In 2015-62, 500 East Lexington Street, Jack Andrews. Also call with that 2015-63, 510 East Lexington Street, also Jack Andrews. That will be 2015-65, 4500 York Road, Fazal Reman. Next will be 2015-66, 119 South Chapel Street, Adam Tawney. 2015-68, 518 South Rose Street, Charles Moore. 2015-72, 107 through 11 West Heath Street. It's also Jack Andrews. 2015-74, 938 South Clinton Street, Steve Carroll. And last, 2015-77, 2222 Jefferson Street, Brian Knight. Okay. If you all can raise your hands and be sworn, please.
You swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, calling the first case, 2015-38, 3315 Pulaski Highway, Hyung Huang. You can come forward, stand right there. You're Mr. Huang? Okay, and Mr. Huang, we have this as an application to use the premises as a garage other than accessory for the purpose of the storage, repair, and servicing of motor vehicles not over 1.5 ton capacity, including tire installation, bodywork, painting, and engine rebuilding. Is that correct? Okay. And Mr. French for the Planning Department?
Thank you. Martin French for the Baltimore City Planning Department. The Department of Planning recommends approval subject to these conditions. There will be no parking, staging, or storing of vehicles on public rights-of-way. There will be no parking or storage of unlicensed vehicles on the property. All work must be performed indoors. All materials, parts, and equipment related to the use will be stored indoors. The area used for temporary storing of vehicles will be adequately screened by an opaque fence or wall. And if a dumpster is used to collect waste and trash related to the use, the dumpster will be placed either inside the existing building or within a masonry enclosure having a solid lockable wooden gate. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Huang, do you, are you willing to agree to those conditions offered by the Planning Department? Okay. And is there anything further you'd like to submit? Okay. Zoning Board staff, having previously reviewed your application, determined there is sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you. Good luck. Next is 2015-43, 877 North Howard Street, James Joseph. You're Mr. Joseph? All right, Mr. Joseph, we have this application as an application to use the first floor as a tattoo parlor and body piercing. Is that correct? Yes, sir. All right. Mr. French for the Planning Department.
Thank you. Planning Department notes this property is located in the Mount Vernon Historic District and therefore recommends approval of this appeal be subject to the condition that any exterior additions, alterations, or modifications to the storefront or its signage be constructed or installed in accordance with a notice to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Joseph, do you agree to the conditions offered by the Planning Department? Okay. Is there anything further you'd like to submit at this time? All right. Zoning Board staff, having previously reviewed the application, determined there's sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you. Next up is, we'll call these two cases together. 2015-55, 3507 through 09 Woodland Avenue, Nathaniel Green, and the other case is 2015-56, 3303 through 05 Woodland Avenue, also Nathaniel Green. Afternoon, Mr. Green. We have this as far as first with Appeal number 2015-55, we have that as an application to realign existing on-site accessory off-street parking facilities from 16 parking spaces to 14 parking spaces to accommodate one handicap parking space and a front yard enclosed trash dumpster, and continue to house the existing 24 dwelling units. And it appears that as to appeal number 2015-56, we have basically the same description. And we also understand that these lots are to be consolidated. Is that all correct? Okay. And have they already been consolidated, or are they going to be?
The application has been filed, it was filed after we had initially submitted the appeal. And the owners were informed that they needed to include this on the appeal in order to get it approved all at one time.
Okay, so the
So the
consolidation is
application
being added.
is, yes, and it's been filed already.
Okay. So, and consolidate. Okay, Mr. French,
Planning Department has no comment on these applications. Thank you.
thank you. And Mr. Green, anything further you'd like to add to supplement the record?
No, except for the apartment complex is still fully occupied. This is a result of them converting 2 units to handicap units, which required the parking. And actually, when we moved the dumpster location off of that front lot, we'll free up 3 parking spaces, so it's really just a wash anyhow.
Okay. Anything further?
No, sir.
Okay, zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, you determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, 2015-57, 821 South Dean Street, Michael Coster.
He couldn't make it.
Okay, and your name, please?
Andrea Rafter.
Okay, and Ms. Rafter?
Rafter.
Rafter, okay. Ms. Rafter, we have this as an application to construct a 2-story rear addition with rooftop deck. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further you'd like to add to sum up the record?
No, sir.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal. Calling next 2015-61, 711 South Clinton Street.
You're done.
Also Michael Coster.
Oh, okay.
Yes. You're here on that case as well? Yes. Okay. And Ms. Rafter, we have that as a application to construct a 2-story rear addition with rooftop deck. Is that correct? All right. Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Okay. And Ms. Rafter, anything further you'd like to add to supplement the record?
No, sir.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you. I think that's the last of yours. Now you're free to go. Okay. Next, 2015-60, 35 South Carlton Street, Taras Hanatishin. Okay. Hope I didn't butcher that too badly. All right. We have this as an application to construct a 2nd floor rear addition with rooftop deck access from the 3rd floor. Is that correct? Yes. All right. Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Hanatishin, is there anything further you'd like to add to supplement the record? Yes, sir. All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you. Good luck. Next, 2015-62, 500 East Lexington Street, Jack Andrews.
Yes, sir.
All right.
This is closely affiliated with 63 as well.
Yes, I was going to say we can also call together with that 2015-63, 510 East Lexington Street, which is also Jack Andrews. And Mr. Andrews, as to appeal number 2015-62, we have that as an application to install telecommunications facility, 8 antennas with rooftop equipment onto an office building's rooftop. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And as to appeal number 2015-63, we have that as an application to install a telecommunications facility consisting of 8 antennas with equipment onto into a parking garage's rooftop. Is that correct?
63 involves 4 antennas.
Okay.
4 antennas only, no equipment.
Okay.
And 62 is 8 antennas with equipment.
Okay. So As to 2015-63, we will revise that to install a telecommunications facility consisting of 4 antennas onto a parking garage's rooftop. Is that correct? All right. And Mr. French for the planning department.
Thank you. Planning Department has identical comments on these applications. The department recommends approval of this appeal, subject to these conditions. The antennas and related equipment must be painted to match the building to ensure they are visually unobtrusive. The antennas and related equipment will remain mounted as illustrated in the plans and elevations submitted to planning, and the applicant will adequately mitigate any adverse effect as specified in the report of the Historical and Architectural Preservation Division of the Department of Planning in accordance with that report's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Andrews, you willing to agree to those conditions offered by the planning department? Okay. Anything further to add to supplement the record? All right. Zoning board staff, having reviewed your application, we determined that there's sufficient information to approve your appeal. We can also call your other case, 2015-72, 107 through 11 West Heath Street. That's also Jack Andrews. And Mr. Andrews, we have this as an application to install a rooftop telecommunications facility consisting of 7 antennas with equipment within a stealth enclosure onto a future 59-unit multiple family dwelling. Is that correct?
That's 12 antennas.
12 antennas, okay. We'll revise that to 12 antennas. I'm going to guess that as to this appeal and 2015-63, that those were posted as respectively 12 antennas and 4 antennas?
Yes, sir. I submitted those.
Okay. All right, good. All right. And is there equipment associated with the Heath Street?
Yes.
Okay,
They will likewise be enclosed within the stealth enclosure.
great. Mr. French for the planning board?
Thank you. The department recommends approval of this appeal, subject to these conditions. The stealth enclosure for antennas and related equipment must be painted to match the building to ensure it is visually unobtrusive, and all must be installed as directed in the notice to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. Panel antennas and related equipment will remain mounted as illustrated in the plans and elevations submitted to planning, and the applicant will adequately mitigate any adverse effect as specified in the report of the Historical and Architectural Preservation Division of the Department of Planning in accordance with that report's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Andrews, are you willing to agree to the conditions offered by the planning board?
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything further you'd like to add to supplement?
No, thank you.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, 2015-65, 4500 York Road, Fazal Reman.
Yes.
And Mr. Reman, do I have that last name correct, by the way?
Rahman. but
Reman,
that's fine.
okay. All right, and Mr. Reman, we have this as application to use the premises as a garage other than accessory for the storage, repair, and servicing of motor vehicles not over 1.5 ton capacity and not including body work, painting, or engine rebuilding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
The Department of Planning recommends approval of this appeal, subject to these conditions. There will be no parking, staging, or storing of vehicles on public rights-of-way. There will be no parking or storage of unlicensed vehicles on the property. All work must be performed indoors. All materials, parts, and equipment related to this use will be stored indoors. The area used for temporary storing of vehicles must be adequately screened by an opaque fence or wall. And if a dumpster is used to collect waste and trash related to the use, the dumpster will be placed either inside the existing building or within a masonry enclosure having a solid lockable wooden gate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And Mr. Reman, are those conditions acceptable to you?
Yes.
And you also understand that there will be some conditions from a community association? Yes. Okay. Okay, and we have a copy of those in the record, David?
Yes, we do.
All right.
We just don't have our, we don't have them in our stack of letters here, but I did review them,
Okay.
and,
Oh, you do?
and we also have it.
Oh, okay, we just didn't bring it over. I hear you. All right. All right, Mr. Reman, anything further you'd like to add? No. Okay. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks.
Next, 2015-66, 119 South Chapel Street, Adam Tawney. Afternoon, Mr. Tawney. We have this as an application to construct a front, side, and rear overhanging second and third floor additions with roof pad and front access garage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application.
Thank you. And Mr. Tawney, anything further you'd like to add to supplement the record?
No.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, 2015-68, 518 South Rose Street, Charles Moore.
Yes.
Afternoon, sir. We have this as an application to construct a two-story rear addition with a rear deck. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Rose, anything further you'd like to add to supplement the record?
No.
Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Okay, thank
Thank you. Good luck. 2015-74, 938 South Clinton Street, Steve Carroll. All right, Mr. Carroll, we have this as an application to construct a two-story rear addition with rear and rooftop decks. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Carroll, anything further you would like to add to supplement the record?
No.
Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, 2015-77, 2222 Jefferson Street, Bryan Knight. Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
We have this as an application to use the premises as a community center, case management and prevention screening clinic. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. French, anything for the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application.
Thank you. And Mr. Knight, anything further you would like to add to supplement the record?
No.
Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. All right. Next, we are going to consider the remainder of the cases in our docket. These include cases for which opposition has signed in. Frequently, we found that opposition is the result of either a lack of communication or miscommunication between the parties, and that it can be useful to offer the parties an opportunity to have a dialogue to try to resolve their issues among themselves, as obviously when two opposing parties approach the board and ask the board to resolve their dispute, one of those parties is bound to go away unhappy. And having a dialogue and trying to reach their own resolution is an opportunity for the parties to avoid that unhappy fate. I'll call the cases for which, or case for which opposition has signed in, and ask if there's any desire to enter into a dialogue. If so, we certainly encourage that, and the parties can just simply step out the double doors to our rear and let us know when they're prepared to go forward. But you, of course, don't have to take that opportunity to speak, although we certainly do appreciate and encourage it. The one case that we've got where opposition has signed in is 2014-538, which is the rear of 2213 through 15 East Pratt Street. That's Todd Vaughn.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Fred Dollar.
And who's here for the opposition? Okay. And have you folks had an opportunity to speak?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Any prospect that further dialogue be productive? Okay. Councilman, you're here on this case? Okay. Any desire to try to mediate between the sides, or?
I think there have been a number of discussions, but I don't think that it's been able to be resolved.
Okay, all right. If you'll have a seat, although you are at the top of the docket, I'm going to try to get through a couple of the smaller cases so I can get some of the other folks out. All right. First up, 2015-30, 5005 through 07 York Road, Lisa Junker. Afternoon. All right, Ms. Junker, we have this as an application to use the premises as a mixed-use, multiple-family detached dwelling with retail offices, 1 efficiency on the first floor, 5 efficiencies on the second floor, office, and 1 efficiency on the third floor. Is that all correct?
Yes, give me 1 second, please.
Sure. While you're figuring all that out.
Can we get sworn in?
Yes, I was
Okay.
going to say.
That'll buy me some time.
If all those intending to give testimony can raise their hands and be sworn, please.
Raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do.
And do we have staff
Yes.
reports?
One report from planning.
The Department of Planning recommends approval of offices and retail space limited to the first floor of the premises, which with an appropriately redesigned storefront could help enliven the pedestrian experience in this vicinity, and 5 efficiency units or other permitted combination of residential units on the upper 2 floors, as there is not an unusual circumstance or hardship to justify variances for conversion of a single-family dwelling unit to multiple smaller residential units. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I'm sorry, I
don't
don't think
have
I've
that.
seen that one. Is that dated March 20th?
Yes,
Okay, so nothing's changed from this one?
that is correct.
Did you see the email that I forwarded to you with the updated floor plan based on your comments?
Yes. And I'm just reading this memo into the record. Now, having said that,
What?
that floor plan was forwarded to the community planner. Unfortunately, I did not receive feedback from her, and she is now away in Florida because her mother is ill, and she's going to be away for another week or 2. So I have no opportunity to get in touch with her at this point to find out whether she considered the revised floor plan acceptable or not. So I have to stand by the report that was previously given.
Okay. We addressed the comments in this report, so we stand by our request for office retail on the first floor, 1 efficiency on the first floor. We have 5 efficiencies on the second floor, and we have 2 efficiencies on the third floor. And it is all within the legally approvable variances put forth in the zoning code of Baltimore City.
Okay, can you go through those numbers again for me? It's just so I have them down.
We have office and retail space on the first floor.
Uh-huh. So no efficiency on the first floor?
No, my finish.
Okay.
We have 1 efficiency on the first floor.
Okay. I have
We
that.
have 5 efficiencies on the second floor,
Mhm.
and we do have 2 efficiencies on the third floor.
Okay.
office on the third floor.
I'm sorry, we have 1 efficiency on the third floor and 1 office on the third floor.
Okay.
And the reason why we had to do it like that was because of accessibility, and the installation of elevators was cost prohibitive and what have you. And what we did is we configured our layout based on staying within the grandfathered parking amount. And any other distribution puts us over the grandfathered parking amount. Okay? So, one of the comments that we addressed was, for example, was it was not preferred to have our original efficiency location to be at the left of the property for safety reasons. So we changed its location to be at the rear right. So the plan that you're looking at shows it originally in the rear left with an outside entrance. So this is now office space, and the efficiency has been relocated to be internally accessed, and that was per planning department comment. So we did that. Once it was explained why we had the office on the third floor, and the concern was the full bath had been removed to make sure that the office stayed an office. So we addressed the planning department comments. I'm speaking from a different, I'll submit it onto record.
Okay.
So what you can actually see on yours are the original conditions and the comments that we're addressing, have those issues removed. So the efficiency was relocated to address the planning department's comments from the March 20th. And then the office is to remain, but the full bath is to be removed to have it as an office and not under the pretense of it being an office. And here is the plan and the email, and that I'm submitting to record, that all intentions were made to distribute it. Ironically, the architect is also in Florida. But under better terms.
Hopefully not with the community.
That being said, can't say that stuff. So that is the proposed resolution to the terms that were brought to our attention that were of concern to the planning department originally.
Okay. And Councilman Henry,
Yes, sir.
is there something you would like to offer?
So, Bill Henry, Councilman, 4th District. I have worked out an agreement with Mr. DeMauro on behalf of the communities.
You can lower that if you'd like.
Not, I don't know, that, now that just feels weirder. Okay. I'm going to move it back out of here, and I'll just try to talk up. So what we have here is a list of uses that Mr. DeMauro has voluntarily agreed to prohibit in the retail space. And the uses that would be prohibited are highlighted in yellow. And then there are some handwritten notes on 2 uses that are not being prohibited as per the original request of the community, where we have clarified that for the use of clinics, healthcare, that Mr. DeMauro would limit that to doctor's offices with no dispensing of controlled substances. And with the currently permitted use of restaurant with alcoholic beverage license, we're going to enter into a separate MOU that if there were to be a restaurant in the future that allowed alcoholic beverage consumption, that the hours of consumption would be limited to between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. And I think that, yes, I think that is complete.
Mr. DeMauro, will you just please confirm that that is your understanding and agreed to, as Councilman Bill Henry has just stated?
Councilman Bill Henry has just stated.
Thank you.
And would you like to offer the document for the record? All right. We'll incorporate terms of that into any approval that would be forthcoming. I guess the last remaining piece then, Mr. French, would be the planning department.
If I could, I'm sorry, I should have said that the communities were really far more concerned with the use of the retail space than the number of efficiency units. So in return for Mr. DeMauro's voluntary restrictions on the use of the space, the community supports his full request in regards to the number of units. And in the absence of the community planner, I'm comfortable saying that the community itself is comfortable.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Henry. And Mr. French, where would you like to leave things as far as the planning department?
Planning department will accept the agreement that the parties have negotiated.
Okay. All right. Great.
I only have one caveat to all that. If a restaurant, tavern, that kind of use comes in, it may require additional parking
So,
based on floor area. So that this appeal today would not be granting a variance for any future parking needs.
I know that's understood on the part of the community.
It's understood on my part as well, that we understand that any use of space that would trigger natural variances would obviously have to come back before the board. It's just what's stipulated in our application right now does not trigger any variances.
That's fine.
It keeps us within
I
the
just wanted to
grandfather
make sure everybody understood.
So we're not waiving, you're not waiving your rights to have us comply with the zoning regulations. I understand that, and that would, and Mr. DeMauro understands that, but furthermore, that would become the proposed occupants issue to address in terms of leasing. But it's understood.
And I don't know if this board has had any conversations with the liquor board, either at the board level or the staff level, but this particular issue for us centers on the fact that there appears to be very vague regulation of BYOB usage in restaurants. And we're trying to do this in a fashion where we're not ruling out the possibility of a nice family-friendly restaurant that wants to allow people to bring in a reasonable amount of beer or wine, but we do not want to inadvertently allow a nightclub or an after-hours establishment. And right now, both the liquor law and the zoning law are a little vague towards how that gets regulated.
And I think we're only approving what's before the
Right.
board today.
Right.
That's all we're approving.
Yeah.
Also in that, just, you mentioned the word tavern loosely, but it is agreed that tavern is off the list of options as far as occupants.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Good luck. Uh, 2015-64, 1018 South Decker Avenue, Christopher Siciliano and Saban Fisher. Afternoon. All right. Mr. Siciliano and Ms. Fisher, we have this as application to construct front and rear rooftop decks with side projection onto a single-family attached end-of-group dwelling. Is that correct? If you can raise your hands and be sworn, please.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All right. Do we have staff reports?
I have nothing. There's no comment on this application.
Thank you. All right. So which one will be doing the speaking primarily? Okay. Congratulations. All right. All right. And Mr. Siciliano, why don't you tell us what you're proposing here?
We have the house is constructed with a bump up or a doghouse on the top floor there.
Mhm.
And so we'd like to build a deck onto the front and then a deck onto the back. And then just a little bit of a push out onto the side, over the alley, slightly over the alley.
Okay. Aha. All right, I see where that is. Now, that portion would be more of a minor privilege issue. So, you'd need to take that up with, who handles minor privileges here?
It's,
Department of General Services.
it's in the Department of General Services. Over in the municipal building across from City Hall. They've gone through recently kind of a reorganization of their minor privilege requirements, so I'm not sure specifically who's in charge over there.
Okay. So, just so that you know, you've got that part of the process too.
But anything that projects over the property line into the public right-of-way requires approval from the city.
Yeah. That would be not from this board, but you'd need to go, that's a separate part of the process you'll need to go through. And sir, you are?
Was the builder, filed the building permit.
Okay.
Mr. Sisnell, and at the time, they said we need, for that 2-foot coming off to the side of the building, that we had to come through this process.
Okay. Yeah, for any building in the public right-of-way, that's a minor privilege approval process, which is separate from, there's another, basically our jurisdiction stops at the property line. So once you exceed that, you have, that's a different
May I ask what
area.
that process is?
Minor privilege.
But where do you file that at? If it's not the zoning department?
Minor privilege department in the Bureau of General Services.
Your name, sir?
Dwight Griffin.
Right, and Mr. Griffith, were you up here when everyone was sworn, or?
No.
Okay, just so that we are consistent, if you can raise your hand, you sworn, please.
You swear,
But, Mr. Griffin?
you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, all right. Now, I guess the other aspect here is that the height of the decks is going to, that's really the primary issue that you're here, is the height of the decks is going to exceed 35 feet. Now, the one thing I was looking for to see if we had was a drawing of the existing structure, so we know how tall the building is.
Yeah, there's an elevation in that packet.
I do not have that.
I don't have that either.
Okay, so it looks like the height is already at 30, just the proposed height of the base of the deck is gonna be 37 feet.
To the top of the deck, sir.
What I've learned here is that the top of the base is gonna be 37 feet, and then you've got the rail that
Yes, sir.
comes up above that.
Yes, sir.
Um,
There are properties on this block that have decks 8 feet higher than what this deck is. And all the immediate adjoining properties are at this height, and we have pictures showing that.
And Mr. French, I think that the planning department may have guidelines for front, I guess the setback for decks, I guess rooftop decks. But there was like an 8-foot setback depending on the width of the street.
And we have an 8-foot setback, sir.
Well, I've got the, that's in the rear. Okay, gotcha. All right, sorry, reverse orientation there. This is the elevation in the rear then is 37 feet. But it looks like the deck in the front is lower than that. I can't tell how tall the front of the
It will be the same height, sir.
Well, I'm trying to find out the roof of the structure. How high is that?
At that front area,
Yes.
approximately 36 feet.
Okay.
The drawing showing the same measurements for the front and the rear, 37 feet.
Yes, sir. It's based on the height of deck that we, when we come out of the doghouse, and then we step up one step to be able to get, because of the slope of the deck at the front.
And from the picture that we've got from I guess 2011, there's an existing deck.
Correct.
There.
Correct.
Yes, it's just off the doghouse. Okay, any questions?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, 2015-70, 1928 Fleet Street, Stephen Fogelman.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, honorable members of the commission.
Afternoon.
Stephen W. Fogelman, here for 1928 Fleet Street. This is a request to add outdoor tables. This is a restaurant and tavern exceeding over 52 to 54% food on a monthly basis for well over a year and a half. I have a petition to submit in support of the request from various local neighbors.
Okay. Before
Oh,
we
I'm
get
sorry.
to that, why don't we, because it sounds like you confirmed what we've got on our data sheet here. So at that point, I'll just ask the witness to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do.
And Mr. Fogelman, were there any other witnesses that you had? Okay.
thank you.
All right. And do we have staff reports?
Just one report from planning.
Thank you. Planning Department did note that the previous use of the property was a tavern, and the applicant would need to demonstrate that the use of the premises was a restaurant in order for accessory outdoor table service to be approvable. Subject to that condition, the department recommends approval of this appeal with these conditions. A minimum of 6 feet of the sidewalk must remain clear and unobstructed for pedestrian use. The capacity of the outdoor seating area will be not more than 6 tables and 24 patrons. The tables will be limited to those that can seat 4 patrons and are to be kept against the wall of the building. There will be no outdoor bar, outdoor music, jukebox, or other form of entertainment, and all patrons must be seated for dining and served by wait staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Mr. Fogelman, it sounded like from your, I guess from the preview that you gave, that the establishment has receipts of, I think you said, either 52 to 54% food sales over alcohol sales. So it sounds like you would meet that threshold for restaurant use. And as to the other conditions offered by the planning department, are those acceptable to your client?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And so now you can proceed with your presentation.
Sure, and let me follow up. There should be a letter emailed to Mr. Tanner from Joanne Massapust of the Fells Point Community Organization. They had voted unanimously to support the project. Additionally, we have a petition to support the outdoor tables I want to put into evidence,
Okay.
as well as a current menu and a couple of very recent write-ups. Palette magazine from March, a feature on the restaurant and tavern, also enclosing an updated diagram with larger numbers than the one that we had filed with. And finally, a nice write-up on Mr. Reusing, who not only owns Bad Decisions, but owns Ostrowski's Washington Street sausage location. The Washington Post featured him and his efforts just last week. And so I want to go ahead and submit those at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I have dined at Bad Decisions on many occasions.
I guess it was a good decision.
It was a good decision, and I think the neighborhood supports the restaurant, but they always say, couldn't you just get them to change the name? So in any event, they have fantastic, it's a mostly pork-based menu, and there is such a thing as bacon tourism, and I've witnessed it, where people come in from out of town. Mr. Reusing has been featured on the Travel Channel, on Bacon Nation program, and he is well known for his meats, additionally incorporating some of Ostrowski's into his restaurant. I'm sorry. So we met with the Fells Point Residents Association it was April Fool's Day, so it was last Wednesday night. And I'm sorry, because I've been out of town on vacation literally since then and up to now. But they voted, we made a presentation, and they voted unanimously to support the project with the proviso that the outdoor tables service cease at 10 p.m. Now, we met earlier with the Fells Prospect Community Organization, and they had indicated 10 p.m. on weeknights and 11 p.m. to cease table service. So FIPRA wants 10 p.m., and my client's willing to do that. At this time, these hearings are two-parters. You have to come to zoning and get your approval, and then you have to go to the liquor board and get your approval to put alcoholic beverages on those tables that you would be giving us permission here for today. So however you want to work that, if you want to work that into a condition for zoning, or if you just want us to bring a signed MOU from FIPRA to the liquor board hearing and have it attached to the liquor license, whatever, however the protocol is normally done here.
Sure. We would have that as part of our decision, and then the liquor board, I think, would probably have, duplicate that to some extent, or replicate it rather. Do we have the letter from Ms. Massapust?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right. And I guess you said there'll be another signed agreement from the Fells Prospect folks, or?
Actually, from Fells Point
Fells Point
Residents Association. And I don't know, if there is some other information that I'm not aware of yet, I'd love to
Okay.
understand that.
Okay. But they haven't gotten that letter hasn't been issued yet?
No.
Okay, all right. But it sounds like there's a little bit of a conflict between the two, where the one is standing on 10 o'clock and the other one is saying 10 o'clock during the week, but 11 o'clock on the weekends.
And I've let Fells Point Residents Association know that Mr. Reusing is amenable to the 10 o'clock deadline if necessary.
Okay. So I think that the way to navigate that would be to go for the lower of the two. So we'll incorporate that into our decision. We'll have the conditions from the planning departments. I think that's about it.
And one of the specific conditions, again, was that, all patrons must be seated for dining and served by waitstaff. That was
Yes.
another common issue that comes up. You don't want people taking drinks from the bar outside. So
Yes.
he'd agreed to that already with all three associations.
Great. Anything further?
No, thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks again. Good to see you.
Take care. Likewise. 2015-71, 2510 Robb Street, Vanessa Richardson.
I don't believe the appellant is here. We have
We would like this case dismissed.
opposition.
Okay. Calling again, case number 2015-71, 2510 Robb Street, Vanessa Richardson. Okay. That's a no-show.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman.
Mary Pat Clark, Baltimore City Council. I'm here with neighbors who have taken time off of work to be here in opposition to this appeal. Frankly, for once in our lives, the planning department and I see eye to eye. This is just beyond the authority of anyone to let happen. It is illegal under the urban renewal plan for the Coldstream Homestead Montebello neighborhood to substitute one non-conforming use for another. It is also, and I have, and these ladies, these residents will testify, it's been at least 10 years since anyone occupied in any way the property that's being proposed for a non-conforming use in this R7 district. Planning agrees with what we know as a fact, and I would hate to have these ladies and gentlemen come down again and take off from work for such a loser.
Well, the applicant, having not shown up, our practice is to dismiss the case. We haven't, did we hear anything from the applicant advising that they'll not be able to show?
No.
Okay, so.
So, in other words, dismiss means it's not pending, it's not
That's correct.
postponed, it's by.
Yes, she would have to start the whole process all over again.
Thank you very much, that's great. Thank you.
Take care.
Do you need, oh.
Okay.
Here.
Doing that, just for the record.
And I have here is my letter for the record, which includes the signed, you have it?
You gave me a copy.
Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, just for your
Sure.
scrapbook. With a big thanks from Chum. I do.
Yeah.
I have copies. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Next, 2015-73, 3505 through 07 Ash Street, Ian Sokolowski.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Mr. Sokolowski. All right, and we have this as an application to construct a new two-story structure to house 2 dwelling units with 4 off-street parking spaces as a multiple-family detached dwelling. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And those giving testimony, raise their hands and be sworn, please.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, do we have staff reports?
One report from planning.
Planning Department has reviewed these plans and has no objection to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Sokolowski, you should tell us what is being proposed here.
Currently on a vacant derelict lot, the owner wishes to construct a 2-story, 2-family dwelling. The dwelling has been designed to keep in keeping with the similar massing, size, and configuration with adjacent buildings there. As mentioned in your report, there are 4 off-street parking spaces available here, which does exceed the minimum. My understanding here that we're really here today to discuss the side yard setbacks. The lot is approximately 35 feet wide, take away 15 feet on each side, so that's not leaving us with a whole lot of space to build anything. So we are proposing approximately 5.5 feet on the south side, 7.5 feet on the north side. On the north side, this property abuts rear yards, so that there is quite a bit of space between the houses to the north. To the south side, it's a similar building. It's another multifamily building, just below, I believe it's 2 units if I'm not mistaken. As I mentioned, currently the lot is derelict. People are dumping in it. Someone is using it for their hot tub. So we'd like to get rid of that, of course. The parking will be accessed from Everhart Street, which is at the rear, so no curb cuts are required. I believe there's no curb at the rear of the property, as I understand. One reason that the house is biased toward the south a little bit greater setback on the north side. There is the neighbor's retaining wall that is infringing on Mr. Miley's property here. We have no intention of interfering with that wall at all, so we're going to keep clear of that. And we have at least 4 feet between the proposed building and the existing retaining wall.
Okay.
So if Mr. Miley has anything to add here?
Stuart Miley, I'm the landowner. This picture, just, showing that it is it's a bunch of debris, trash, things just being deposited there. The property was purchased from Vacant Value, Baltimore City. Their intent to, develop and bring up tax revenue, this, that, the other. So I'm hoping that this will aesthetically fall in line with all the current homes on that street and add into the value of the neighborhood.
Would you like us to make this part of the record?
Yes, thank you.
And Mr. Miley has reached out to the community association there several times. They just got back to us yesterday and proposed a meeting, which is this evening. Mr. Miley will meet with them this evening to discuss the project here.
And there are 2 addresses here, 3505 and 3507. Have the lots been consolidated, or?
Yes.
They have been, okay. All right. Okay. Anything further? Thank you. All right, and 2015-89, 346 Dennison Street, Azora Rideout. Afternoon. Right, you're Ms. Rideout? Okay, and we have this as an application to use the portion of a church for a 20-child daycare center, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, if you can raise your hand and be sworn, please.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, do we have staff reports?
We have one report from the planning department.
Planning Department has reviewed this application and has no objection to the appeal. The department does suggest that the applicant contact the Parking Authority of Baltimore City concerning the status of the passenger loading zone for the church in order to have a safe drop-off and pickup area for children. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Rideout, why don't you tell us what is being proposed here, and you can also address the drop-off zone issue.
We are currently, it is currently the church, and we want to use a portion of it for daycare for kids ages 2 to 5. And we currently have 4 parking spaces that could take care of the parking for the employees. And there is a spot that they could drop off the daycare, the children, safely.
Okay, and where would that be?
That is right there at the parking lot,
Okay.
on the parking lot.
Looks like that is on,
On Mulberry Street.
yeah. Okay. And what would the ages be for the children?
2 to 5.
And what would the hours of operation be?
The hours would be from like 6:30 to 7.
All right. Okay. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Okay. All the way up to the top. Student calling 2014-538, rear of 2213 through 15 East Pratt Street, Todd Vaughn. Sorry, we're calling you folks at the end of the document. I just wanted to get some of the other cases that were a lot, smaller than this. I looked at our opposition sheet and had a number of names all signed in for this one case. So I figured that there was no need to have all the other folks waiting for to watch you guys. So. All right, Mr. Lauer, we have this as an application to construct a 3-story, single-family attached dwelling with 1 off-street parking space. Is that correct?
That is correct. Fred Lauer representing Todd Vaughn.
All right. And can all those giving testimony raise their hands and be sworn, please?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Do we have staff reports?
Yes. First,
Okay, first we have a letter from Jeff and Janelle Olds, residents at 2213 East Pratt Street. They write that over the past 3 months, my wife and I have had the proposal submitted by Mr. Todd Vaughn to build a 3-story single-family home behind our home on a lot that was never designed to be zoned for such a building. When I purchased this home to raise my family in, never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that I would be dealing with such a nightmare, nor would I have thought that this could drag on for months on end. I had been present at each of the hearings regarding this proposal, missing work and class. Please know that if I did not feel strongly enough as I do about my safety, the safety of my family, and the overall concern that this structure creates for the Butchers Hill community at large, I will not have missed work and class to attend these hearings. My hope is that you will seriously consider the following concerns regarding this proposal, not only on my family's behalf, but on the behalf of the entire community. They go on to write, Zoning Code 15219, 4 and 5, states a variance granted shall not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity and shall not diminish property values. In addition, it states that a variance shall not impair an adequate supply of light and air to the adjacent property. Finally, it states that the proposed building shall not create a potential fire problem. They go on. Rear access points to 2213 East Pratt Street by firefighters will not be possible, including the use of hoses. Mr. Vaughn was asked if he would restore the pre-existing sally port, and he informed us that it would take away from the square footage of the home he was planning on building. Therefore, no, he would not include a sally port. My home's fire escape leads to the back of the house where there used to be a sally port that leads up to my alley. Mr. Vaughn was cited on March 30th, 2015 for illegally constructing a wall that blocked our access to the public alley. Next item. The home at 2213 East Pratt is not a newer construction. Therefore, it does not have a sprinkler system in place to assist with putting a fire to the rear of the home. I assume putting out a fire to the rear of the home. The proposed 32-foot dwelling will put the home at 2213 East Pratt in full shadow all day, every day of the year. The rear of 2213 East Pratt Street faces due south, where the sun shines, prevailing summer breezes, and the south-southwest will be blocked by the proposed dwelling. The proposed house will be on a 10-foot wide alley. A front lot line cannot be established because the zoning code, section 1-156, says that the right-of-way needs to be 50 feet wide or 30 feet wide if for pedestrian use only, which this is not. In addition, the proposed project violates zoning code 10-306. The dwelling would be required to have a parking space, and that space would need to be accessed by a street or an alley that is at least 15 feet wide. The alley is 10 feet wide. There will have to be a disruption of utilities and increased cost to the owners of 2213 Pratt Street due to the fact that BG&E poles are not high enough to allow the homes on Pratt Street to receive electricity without the poles being extended, and the electrical drop on 2213 being increased. In speaking with BG&E, the owner of 2213 will be billed for the expense. The homeowners of 2213 East Pratt Street will have a newborn in the home, and a disruption of utilities will be a huge problem and incredibly inconvenient for them. Even with the increase of a height of 10 feet to the pole, the lines may not clear the proposed structure. They definitely will not meet the safety standards if there is a rooftop deck installed, going over the assumed height of 32 feet. As a result of a lot going from just being dirt and grass to a parking lot, a drainage problem has been created. The French drain that was supposed to be used to drain the runoff from 2213 East Pratt Street and drain into the alley was paved over, thus creating a situation where water pools in their backyard and spills over to the garage at 2211 East Pratt Street. Please refer to the letter from an engineer further describing the problems with drainage. This has caused cracking and damage to the patio of 2213 and has created mildew smell in the garage for 2211. Mr. Vaughn claims this problem will be fixed with the approval of this proposal, but because this proposal does not speak to this issue, it would appear that a house going there will make drainage issues worse. Not only will the runoff from 2213 have nowhere to drain, but neither will the runoff from the proposed house. Therefore, more water will be pooling into the back lot, and more damage will be caused. The documents submitted by Mr. Vaughn are vague, incomplete, and deceptive. According to the city's website, the proposal is missing the following information: the address, including the block and lot. This is lacking due to the fact that there is no address because this lot is unnamed, unnumbered, on an unnumbered alley with no other single-family homes on the alley. The site plan does not accurately portray the curb cuts and access drives. The proposal does not give accurate information showing the proposed garage or carport. Both are mentioned in the proposal, are useless because there's not enough room to pull into them unless they utilize the other neighbors' properties. The handwritten sketch is not drawn to scale with no scale used or indicated. Each floor is not indicated on the plan. There are no room dimensions noted, no grade, primary or secondary egress listed. The proposal submitted by Mr. Vaughn submitted no design drawings of the lot or the proposed structure. The square footage of the proposed site plan does not match the number on his application. My wife and I, the owners of 2213, are in support of development and understand how this can improve communities. However, we have to consider the intent and use of the property, and this proposal does not make sense for this particular lot. The rear lot of 2215 was never intended to be a separate single-family home and presents many problems for the owners of 2213 and the community as a whole. The community and residents at 2213 feel that a three-story structure is excessive, dangerous, and does not fit the intended use of the property. According to your own mission, your goal is to provide the highest level of services and leadership in urban and strategic planning, historical and architectural preservation, zoning design, development, and capital budgeting to promote a sustained economic, social, and community development of the city of Baltimore. If this is truly your mission, this proposal does nothing to achieve any of your goals, and if anything, it is an embarrassment to the board to even hear this case based on the poorly drafted application that was submitted. You may be thinking that this will add another house to the city and will increase your tax collection. However, it will do the direct opposite. It will force my wife and I out of the city, decrease our property values, and the house at that location will never generate as much as our home will generate for you in its current state. They have also supplied the letter mentioned from their engineer. He writes in brief, "It is our understanding that the property was divided as indicated in deeds and each recorded as a sublease or lease according to the Old English laws of the land transfer under Lord Baltimore. To determine the soundness of the land transfers under these lease terms, a detailed title search is needed. We recommend that you consult with a legal advisor concerning the legal aspects of past land ownership, lease, sublease, land transfers, and the future use and development." The next recommendation from the engineer: originally, prior to the property division, surface water runoff would have been collected in the yard drain between the main residence in the front and the detached garage structure in the rear, and water would flow then towards the rear alley via a pipe conduit beneath the rear property to the alleyway. Presently, due to property changes, this corridor is missing and the yard drain within your property is lacking, broken, blocked, or causing your yard to flood. We recommend informing the adjacent property owner of the stormwater management related problems to obtain a resolution. There are some concerns that no egress escape is available to the rear of your property should a fire occur. Removal of the brick wall would likely be needed to assist in egress. They recommend that this is a legitimate concern, and we recommend consulting with the fire marshal for further guidance. In consideration of life, safety, in the event of a fire, future property development surrounding your property should likewise consider this concern. We also have received a letter from Fells Prospect. They indicate that the documents submitted by Mr. Vaughn are vague and do not meet the board's requirements for a variance submission. that the proposed house will be on a 10-foot wide alley, that the proposed 32-foot dwelling, not confirmed by drawings, could be higher, will put the home at 2213 in full shadow of every day of the year. The rear access to 2213 by firefighters will not be possible, including hoses. The proposed structure will block the rear access of 2213. That openings would not be accessible to firefighters. The BG&E poles are not high enough to allow the home on Pratt Street to receive electricity without the poles being extended. This repeats. If any of these individual variances are not problematic, the collection as a whole presents a much larger problem that will create problems in the neighborhood and potentially for the city. If this is approved, the quality of the neighborhood will decline. This will allow any homeowner with a garage to build a 3-story house in place of the garage. This one building gives the potential to allow hundreds of our neighbors to change the historical nature of our community and city. The overhead photo shows an entire alley filled with garages. Picture this as an alley with other garages with 3-story homes in their place. All homes will be blocked of light, air, safety, access, egress, and will deplete the historical character from the existing architecture of our community. Butchers Hill writes, even though this appeal has been granted lengthy postponements, detailed information has not been provided for the proposed house. We understand the neighbors have presented their concerns to the appellant, but he declines to work with the neighbors to alleviate their concerns. Without more information, Butchers Hill Land Use Committee has to oppose the appeal. The Upper Fells Point Improvement Association writes, the proposed appeal conflicts with the Upper Fells Point Improvement Association's established land use guidelines. That the proposed development having less than 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling would be opposed. All proposed construction must be compared with its surrounding buildings for compatibility with height, scale, character of architecture. Although the subject property lies across the street from Upper Fells Point Improvement Association's boundaries, it is likely that the zoning board's ruling on this case could set a precedent for future appeals in their area. We also have submitted 20 individual letters from residents and against the proposal. Councilman Kraft writes, as a representative for the 1st District, I am writing to express my support for the community in opposition to the above-mentioned appeal. The appeal presents a series of issues. Of immediate concern is the proposal to construct a house that will block the residents of 2213 and 2215 East Pratt Street from exiting the back of their homes in the event of a fire or emergency. He writes, the planned project will also pose an issue regarding parking. The proposed plans, thin in detail, requires a suspended leap of faith with regard to the layout of the garage for this property. The house as designed would have a garage that would front on to the corner of the intersection of a 10-foot by 15-foot alley. Due to the location, the proposed garage, the future residents of this property would be forced to trespass onto the property of a resident on Madeira Street in order to pull out of the garage. In reality, this garage will almost certainly be used for storage. The lot has been used for up to 6 parking spaces, creating a net loss of several spaces in a neighborhood where parking is already an issue. In addition to the concerns above, granting the variance requested in this appeal would run contrary to several other requirements listed in Section 15-219. Under a plain reading of the above Section 15-219, it appears clear that the board cannot grant a variance in this appeal and would create significant questions moving forward for the board and applicants to which required findings are actually required. It will substantially diminish the property values of the house immediately adjacent by increasing alley congestion, increasing safety concerns, and decreasing available parking. This appeal does not take place in a vacuum. It will adversely affect a significant number of residents in this community, especially those living closest to the property. Taking into consideration all of these concerns this project raises and viewing this appeal in light of those concerns and the code's plain language, I write to express my opposition to this appeal. Last letter. We have a differing letter from Mr. Lauer, the attorney. He writes, he believes that the drainage situation will be greatly improved with the building of a structure on this property, and the 25-foot yard setback will be grass and dirt instead of macadam. The proposed home will be 3 stories immediately out of the rear of 2215. The view from the rear of 2213 Pratt Street will only be 2 stories. My client designed the property in such a way to intentionally be considerate of the client's view, and that the property of 2213 sits considerably higher than the proposed home. The building of this home does not change the client's rights to the rear of his property, though through my client's property. Regardless of whether there is a home on this lot or not, your client does not have the right to trespass on my client's property to access the rear of his property. And we have planning's report.
Thank you. Planning Department has, of course, noted that this property is on a back alley, not a named street. However, the department also notes that this property is located in the Butchers Hill Historic District, which is under the jurisdiction of the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. On that basis, because all exterior changes, including new construction, are subject to review by that commission, the department recommends approval, subject to approval by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation, of the design and massing of the proposed single-family dwelling structure. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lauer.
Fred Lauer, representing Todd Vaughn. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want to let the councilman go first. If he-
Councilman Kraft, I'm assuming that you're appearing as part of the opposition?
I am, and Mr. Lauer has indicated that he would extend me the courtesy of allowing me to speak. If that's
Mm-hmm.
okay with you.
Okay.
If it's okay with you.
That's fine.
Okay. So, you've heard my letter, but I do want to expand on the letter. I know that you have an opportunity to review these things beforehand, and I know that you have an opportunity to discuss them beforehand, but I think that a case like this is unique, and I want to draw some distinctions with things that you have seen. Number one is on the drawings, on the permit application. If this permit application went over to housing for permits, it would be kicked back because the drawings do not provide what housing requires on a permit application. So I think it makes it difficult for anyone to really look at what's being proposed on this site. This site is an alley. It is not a street. There are no houses here. When you go down this alley, there are garages, there are old carriage houses, but it is an alley. It is not a semi-attached house or an attached house. When you look at planning reports, in the zoning district, single-family attached dwellings are permitted, and so it is allowed. This is not a single-family attached dwelling. This is a house that is going to be built in an alley. It's not a row house. It's not something that's being built with something else. It's a house in an alley, on an alley. The front door will be on an alley where no one else lives, where the rats run, where the trash is put, where everything else. That's where the front door of this house will be, on a 10-foot alley. The parking issue, this parking requirement, if you went to get a curb cut in anywhere, but particularly in southeast Baltimore, if you look at the curb cut guidelines say this: you cannot get a curb cut if the number of cars that are going to be taken off the street are going to be the same as the number that can be put on the street, okay? Right now, you have 6 parking spaces that are on this lot, and that's the testimony that there, I mean, the information, and you'll get that. I don't think there's any dispute there. you're going to take 6 cars off the street when you take this lot out. You're going to put them on the street, and you're going to get a curb cut for a variance for another, for 1 car potentially. But still, there's no evidence and there's no testimony, and even in the reports that we get from planning, no one has given a transportation design to say whether there is a turning radius for a car to get out of that garage onto that alley and make the turn. That's an important factor. The history of this site, if you look at the history of the site, and you have that in your briefing, there have been requests to put additional dwelling units at these locations, and they have been denied in the past when you look at the additional dwelling units. If you build a single-family home back there, just because it's a 3-store single-family home doesn't mean it's going to be 1 family. If you go to Butcher's Hill, many of these houses back there have 4, 5, 6 dwelling units in them. So while it may be a single-family home, it could well end up becoming 2 or 3 apartments or multiple dwelling units, as many of those do, because once it's built, then it can come back for other appeals for other uses, as we all know. And then those things become things as conditional uses, and then they qualify and everything else. So now we have multiple users in a house where we've already had determinations made that you couldn't put more dwelling units on that site. There is no address for that site. There's no street there. It can't be unless you're going to make it 2213 and a half East Pratt Street, deliver in the alley, because there's no address. All it is a lot address. Finally, and most importantly to me, and I think to everyone is, and this was the closing of my letter, this is a variance, and as you know, there are required findings for a variance. And there are a couple of rules that come into play that I'd like to really point out, because I'd like to see them met, particularly in this case. And that is, when the decisions are made under 2112, the board has to provide the zoning administrator with copies of the decisions, the determinations, and everything else that are there. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the findings of fact. Under the required findings of fact, under 15218 and 15219, there have to be very specific findings of fact, as you all know, on numerous items. And I would like the board to provide very specific findings of fact as to every single one of these items, because I think there are so many of them that are not met in this particular case, that when you go through each one of those and look to see whether the applicant has met the burden as to them, you are going to find that the applicant has not, and because the applicant has not, the variance can't be granted. So I would ask you to pay very particular attention to them and to be able to provide us with them, because I think of the nature of this particular case, those findings of fact are going to be critical as this case moves forward. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
If I might ask the councilman a question, please.
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilman, have you been to this site?
I have.
You have a?
I have. I walked through the alley before.
Good.
Yeah.
And you're opposed to this house in the R8 zone, this single-family home?
On this site.
On this site?
In this alley, yes.
What do you propose he does with this lot?
I have no problem with him leaving it like it is.
It's like it is what?
It's parking. They put parking on it. People park.
He has to have an off-street parking ordinance for more than 3 parking spaces, Councilman. Would you support that then?
That's a separate issue. That's not before
No,
the
it's not.
board.
I'm trying to figure out what to do with this lot.
That's not.
And you said not
It's
this.
not our responsibility to find out what else he would do with the lot. That's not the responsibility here today. And it's not ours. Let me say this. A person buys a piece of property and they make a determination when they buy the piece of property to what they do with it. It's not our obligation to make sure that they make a profit, all that, or to make the property more profitable for them. Person has a property, they've used it for a number of years for particular use.
they determine to choose the use, to change the use, that's up to them. As said before, I'm happy to discuss any other issues, but that issue is not here today.
Well, let's be straightforward here. You're not going to support an off-street parking ordinance.
I said that I'm happy to discuss other issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Mr. Lyer.
Yes, I'd like to call Mr. Vaughn. Give us your name for the record, please.
Todd Vaughn,
And where do you live, Mr. Vaughn?
2217 East Pratt Street.
And how long have you lived there?
I've lived in the house almost 19 years.
Okay, so that's two addresses down, basically.
It is.
Yes. And you own the lot at 2213 to 2215, subject to this application, correct?
That is correct.
And how long have you owned that?
I bought it in 2000. 2000.
2000, okay. And what was the use of the lot when you purchased it?
It was vacant, and
prior to that, do you have any history about that, the use of the lot?
yes, I do. It had been used as a restaurant, and it had been, for quite a long time, it had been a restaurant, a bar.
A restaurant bar. And so was, to the best of your knowledge, was this entire lot a restaurant and bar?
Yes, it was.
Was there residents there too?
I do not know that for a fact.
Okay. Let me, I don't know what exhibits the board has, but I do want to, and this is part of the record, make sure that the board has a reference for this.
Question, Mr. Lyer, did your client say that he has an ownership interest in 2213 and 2215 as well, or just 2217?
I own a 2215, the house,
Okay, you own 2215.
and I live in 2217.
Okay, but you don't have an interest in 2213?
No, I do not.
Okay, only 2215, all right.
Right. If I might submit,
It's confusing because the lot is described in a descriptive, and it says the rear of 2213, 2215.
if I might submit this as Exhibit 1, I don't know what the board has, but marked on there in an X, I'm sure the board doesn't have that, shows the lot itself. Along with that, if I have that labeled 1 and this one 1A, this is a photograph, aerial photograph that's taken that the board may have the same thing. So, baby. The board may have the same thing, and it shows this whole block. And I think it's a good reference for the board, just so that you can kind of see the layout. I had trouble myself until I got there and kind of looked at it. So, so you marked with the X on that, I think you marked them, Mr. Bond, is the actual lot. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct, okay. And have you had any issues or problems with this lot since 2000 when you purchased it?
I've had people throwing trash on it on a regular basis. I have had vagrants coming through it. In fact, we had a robbery at 2215 because they walked into the lot and climbed over the wall and took a bicycle. Right now, people like to bring their dogs there. It's turned into a, when they don't wish to go to the park, it's too far to walk, they come to my open space.
Okay.
And a
what's
few
the
with drugs on occasion.
And what's the size of this lot?
It's 35 by 62.
And you propose to put a single-family dwelling there, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, Mr. Chairman, we have the original drawings here, and if the board has them, I'll skip this, and because we have some revised ones that we'd like to submit a little later that address some of the concerns that have been raised here.
I think we only have.
That one,
area
okay.
drawings.
Well, let me just go ahead and submit this then as Exhibit 2. This is the drawing. If you could take one out and pass it to the board, and I'll give Mr. Silvager one. It's part of the record. This is the drawing. This is the original proposal. Isn't that correct?
It is.
This is your original proposal, and originally you proposed, just kind of go through what you proposed here, the schematics of it.
I proposed a parking pad of 13 feet across, 17 feet deep, with a building site of approximately 22 feet by 37 feet, leaving a backyard of 25 feet, which would be a yard garden.
Okay? And if I might, in terms of this drawing, does this meet the code requirements to the best of your knowledge?
It
This
does.
is a sketch. I mean,
Yes.
this isn't anything you take across. You've submitted plans and developed houses in Baltimore, haven't you?
I've
And
probably
this
built
isn't anything you take
20 of them.
across the street, is it?
No.
No, but this is a schematic for the board to get an idea of the general framework that you're talking about.
Right.
Isn't that correct?
That's correct. I needed no side setback, and I needed 25 feet in the backyard.
Okay. And the other one that's in there is labeled north elevation. I have it as Exhibit 3. And this shows kind of the rear of the property as you proposed it previously. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And just walk again the board through that schematic.
Basically, it shows a 30-foot structure for part of the third floor, and then I dropped down to a second floor to put an outside deck, which would be 21 feet.
Okay,
So 21 and 30 and 14 equal 35.
okay.
Florida is the opposition copy of that.
Yes, yes, they do. And let me give you a copy of this photograph. Did you take this photograph, Mr. Vaughn?
I have to look at it first.
Well, let's take a look at it. That's a
I
good
did.
idea. And when did you take it approximately?
I probably took all of these prior to our first scheduled hearing.
Okay? About 2 months ago?
Yes,
Okay.
I don't remember when it.
And what does the photograph depict?
It depicts garages. And I believe that it's on our alleyway. I had told you that I would take exhibits of garages on the alleyway so people could see how they were positioned, and up and down, up in 3 or 4 blocks, to show that there were houses on a 10-foot alley. There were garages on 10-foot alleys.
But this is the alleyway behind your property, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. I've got other photographs here, labeled Exhibit 5. I'll give Mr. Silver a copy. Now, these are 10-foot alleys. Some of them are, aren't they?
They are.
Okay. So we're going to try to trouble sorting it here. Take the exhibit thing, you get that. These are 10-foot alleys, and people park there all the time, don't they?
They sure do.
They pull in there off the alley and park.
That's correct.
Here, hold on to this. Where's this one taken, if you will? Identify those.
I believe these could be 1 block up or 1 block beyond going across Collington.
So they're in your neighborhood?
Yeah, they're all these pictures that I took are no more than 2 blocks, maximum 3, in any direction.
And I have one more photograph here that I'd like to submit. And this one, you wrote Todd on there. Why'd you write Todd on this one?
Because I, at one time, owned a house that I actually built on a 10-foot alley. And right next door to it is another garage that is owned by...
Speak in the microphone.
sorry, is owned by a gentleman who's on the Land Use Committee, Virgil Bertram, and his house is a 10-foot alley.
Point that out to the.
It is the
Where is
red
that?
brick building.
Okay.
Okay.
And he has a house there on that 10-foot alley?
Yes. Well, he uses an office. I don't know if he sleeps there, but.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I might, go ahead.
That structure there, do you know, is that a pre-existing structure? Is it a new structure?
Which structure are you referring to,
The
sir?
one you were just talking, I guess you were talking about this red brick?
This red.
The red brick, I don't actually know how long that has been there.
Okay, one more package of exhibits. Sylvia. These are drawings, and these are revised drawings that you would like the board to consider today.
That
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Let me, if you'll hold on to that one, and I'll pass these out to the board, make sure that Mr. Tanner gets one also. I believe there are five items there in this package.
There are.
And I think we'll call it Exhibit 7. I think that's the number we're up to. If you could just, once the board has a copy, here, we have another.
Okay.
I have lots of them. Oh, never mind.
No.
Do you have an extra packet?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
That's fine, Mr. Tanner. Got it for the record.
Mr. Vaughn, you have made significant changes to that Exhibit 2, haven't you?
I have indeed.
And let's walk through what you've done, just one thing at a time here. There seems to be a walkway here on the left-hand side.
I created a 3-foot alleyway that would go to 2213 that could be used in case of an emergency.
And how do you see that happening? Is that a gated with a key or some
No,
combination?
it would be left open.
It would be open, okay. And what else have you done here? There's parking. Have you changed parking?
Yes, I've made the parking available now for 2 cars.
Okay, 2 cars.
That is correct.
And was that out of some of the concerns that you heard?
Yes, it was. There was concerns that they might have 2 cars in that single-family unit, and they felt that an extra car on the street would not be welcome, so I took space out of the original plan and created a space for 2 cars.
Okay, that's the first exhibit. Can you go to the second part of that?
First
First
exhibit
page.
here.
Yeah.
Was there any effort made to stake this out and see if it was accessible by car?
You mean whether or not a car could get into that space? Well, cars currently get in right now where I have some cars parked, there's like a 12-foot space that they drive through, and there's a 10-foot alleyway there. And actually, this property has an easement on, I used to own the property adjacent to it across the way, which you'll see on your diagram, where there are 5 garages, and when I created that, I made an easement for this, and it's a 15-foot easement. So in actual fact, they have a turning radius of 25 feet.
And doesn't, the garage being on this side, isn't it closer to that 15-foot alley that comes down at the L, if you will?
It is indeed.
Okay. And the most significant thing,
And in addition to which, by having the walkway adjacent to the parking, it makes it, well, because to make this alleyway for 2213, I had to put it on the left-hand side.
okay. Significantly,
Just so I understand
oh,
better.
sure.
Can you draw on here where that easement is?
There is no easement, I've just created.
No, it's, an easement's been created.
Oh,
But it's
oh,
in the rear right
oh,
here.
right here.
Let him do it. Right here.
I'm just doing it with dotted lines, and I'm doing it approximately. It's right across from it.
You want to do it on everybody's?
Well, that's a,
If you take, may I have that right here for a second, just want to change. Yes. You see the big X? Well, right across from the X, it'd be right
What I see right across the street, looks like that there's
Across the alley.
parking, the alley. Looks like there is some kind of a parking lot that's there.
there's a,
Go ahead.
But it would also looks like,
right here. You see, here, right, is the lot we're talking about. Here's parking right here. Right here, there are 5 garages, and they have spaces, and I created this complex. And I made an easement, not only for the 5 spaces, but also for 2217 and 2215. Thinking that down the road, I might want parking so that they could make that swing.
okay. Is there, what looks to be a telephone pole that's there?
There is a telephone pole that is in this little alleyway here.
Looks like it's
Not
right
one-
there at the corner.
That's correct. But you can come in, you come down off of Patterson Park, come in here like that.
I guess this is Madeira Street right here,
Yes, sir.
and so you turn in,
Well, they would actually come in, the easiest way to do this from the standpoint of turning, is come down Patterson, and
That's the-
take a
this is
right,
another block, right?
and come down the alleyway, crossing Madeira, and then coming here. Now, if one is concerned about the telephone pole, I could move the garage to the other side, and then they could be able to come in like that.
and
But
who owns that, lot on Madeira? 22, looks like it's 204 and 202 Madeira.
202, 204 is basically a condominium association, and there are 10 garages, 5 on Madeira, and 5 right here.
Okay, so these are just garages right now,
Garages.
and they're commonly owned between the,
No, the individuals own them.
well, each individual garage is owned, but the entire thing is commonly owned between all of the garage
Right.
owners.
Right.
Okay. And there's this easement that's across the, that portion of the drive or the lot.
Correct.
Do those, what's the term of that easement? Does it require that, I guess what I'm thinking of is, can someone buy this parcel of property, 202 and 204, buy it, knock down the garages and build a house there?
No.
Or build whatever?
Well, they'd have, no, they cannot.
Why not?
Well, let me put it this way, they have to deal with 10 individual owners, and once a condominium is created, and we have decreed common ground, you can't change that. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
well,
And we did not have comments from the gallery. We talked about that at the beginning of the hearing. So please.
Okay.
I was never, I don't know the answer to that, quite honestly.
Okay, back to this last set of exhibits. I know some show the side where there are no windows, but I want to focus on the rear of the property and the height.
Okay.
Because, did you make changes because you took out more, you put in more parking, you put a walkway all the way through? Did you make any changes to make up for that space?
Yes, I did, sir.
And what did you do?
Fred, what I did is I went from, one part of the original was 30 feet and the other part was, I think,
21.
21, 22. I went in the entire structure to 30 feet in height, and I took, instead of having 25 feet in the rear, I dropped it down to 20.
Okay.
But 20 in this area is a very large yard.
Now, do you know what the zoning code height requirement is?
I think it's 35,
Okay.
but I'm,
So you're under the height requirement.
right.
All right, let me get to a couple other things here.
Where's the building diagram? This?
Yes, that would be the back of it, which would be the north elevation,
Okay, so this is the back of the,
the structure.
okay, so it's from the
If
rear
you were to
yard.
looking at,
From the rear of Pratt Street.
if you were looking, shall we say, from 2213 in your backyard, that's what you would see.
Okay. And that's this one here,
That's correct.
and then this is the view from the
That is the front
front,
from the alley,
okay.
and that is the south elevation.
Is there a side?
Yeah, the two sides. It's just a blank page because it's too close to a property to have any windows, so it would just be a wall.
Okay,
And the other one, because there's a parking lot here, it pulls at 17 feet away from the abutting property, so I put 4 windows there. That's on the second and third floor.
okay. Okay. All right.
Okay. Speaking of, let's just stay with design for a minute here. You realize that you would have to, if this board would approve it, go to site plan review, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you'd have to go to CHAP and get their approval?
Absolutely.
And
I-
have you committed to also going to the Fells Prospect community, which is the community that encompasses this lot, for their review of this also?
Yes, I have,
Okay.
which I actually thought this property was in Fells Prospect.
Okay. Have you looked at other uses of this lot?
Yes, I have. I originally wanted to do parking on the spot, and I had hired you to go to Jim Kraft because we needed an ordinance from him, and you came back and told me that he would throw himself on a sword before he went and asked for an ordinance.
Okay. Are there many properties like this in Baltimore City?
I think this is rather unique
Okay. And what makes it unique?
because of the size, because at one time it was commercial property in front of a residential district, and
Is the biggest zoning requirement that you have in terms of this proposal that 10-foot alley?
that's the only objection I was, that was the reason I was denied being able to pull a permit in the very beginning.
Okay. In terms of drainage, I heard mention of drainage here. Do you think putting this building on there will hurt the drainage or help the drainage in the area?
I think if we have a 20-foot yard with garden and dirt, that it will help the drainage.
And what about the structure itself? Will that help the drainage?
All the water that falls on that roof will come out in the alleyway.
Okay. And the planning department has certain conditions in there going to CHAP, and you agree to those conditions? is that
Absolutely, agreed from the very beginning.
correct? Okay.
Mr. Howard, I know this is also brought up in some of the correspondence, you just had raised it now. You're talking about a variance request being associated with this application. I'm not seeing what the variance request is. What we've got here is that there's an issue with the front lot line and the access for the parking, which your client just said that was the reason why he was denied a permit. But I don't see a variance request.
The practical difficulty, Mr. Chairman, is caused by the zoning code. And the zoning code itself says that you have to have a 15-foot alley. If this were a commercial structure, I believe planning can attest to this, you wouldn't have that requirement. However, no one is going to rezone this to commercial. The other thing I would point out to the board and it's,
So I'm a little bit clear, a variance from what?
a variance from the zoning code, the requirements of the code. We're asking for a variance from the code now for two things. For a 20-foot rear yard instead of a 25. And we're asking for a variance from the requirement, the zoning code requirement, that there be, that you can't build a residential property on a 10-foot alley. It has to be at least a 15-foot. The other thing I would point out to the board, and I was going to point it out in summation, under 15-214 of the zoning code, and in my many years of practice, I've only used it once, one other time. This is an unusable lot.
Well,
This is an unusable lot. And I will make that argument at the end.
sure. One thing, if you're arguing for a variance, one of the required findings is that the proposal will not increase the danger of fire or otherwise endanger the public safety. And I think that the reason behind the requirement that you were talking about, that is the access, is that there's a recognition that structures, particularly residential structures, need to be accessible for firefighting or emergency equipment. And 10-foot alleys don't really provide that. And while the houses that are on Pratt or Madeira or Collington or any of the other surrounding streets are accessible to emergency equipment, this wouldn't. And you could have a situation where if there is a fire, how is it accessible to emergency equipment? And how can we then find then that there isn't an increased danger of fire or risk to, or endangerment of public safety if a residential structure isn't accessible to emergency equipment?
Mr. Bond, do you have a take on that? Because I do, and if you want to respond.
Well, it's awfully close to Madeira, and 9 times out of 10, when people are trying to do anything with trucks, they just park in Madeira and run a hose. But
And I would also point out, the other thing that kind of ties in there, Mr. Chairman, is if you talk about fire engines or places trying to get up to the rear of this, if you look at this photograph, they can't get there anyway, except for this lot. So other places in the city have that blockage, if you will, from the rear, in
But
terms of,
if you're talking about, I mean, I'm going to imagine that if there's a fire at 2215 and 2213,
yep,
the fire truck is going to pull up there on Pratt Street,
correct.
and they're going to fight the fire that way. They're not going to try to get into the back, because I don't think that they could access the rear of those structures with the truck. And while even Madeira is kind of a narrow street, it is, I'm going to imagine anyway, accessible to emergency equipment. But if there's a house that's located there on this lot, and from the pictures, it appears as though there are a number of structures that are there. None of them look like they're residential. They look like they're all garages that are there. But if there's a house now that's in the middle of this block that's not accessible to emergency equipment, how do you, I mean, I think that that's,
I would
and so,
answer the
and I,
same way that you would if one of the garages caught on fire.
well, I don't think that a couple of things. First of all, for a variance, it says they increase the danger of fire. That is, that if there is a certain risk of a fire there now, then you don't make that worse. So the other structures that are there look like they've been there for a long time. They probably predate the zoning code, so those aren't really an issue. There's nothing currently on the lot, so the risk of fire is about zero, other than maybe if there's a car that's parked there, it might catch on fire. And so long as no one's living in their car, there's really minimal danger there. But if there's now a house and there's, activity going on in the house that normally goes on, people, are cooking, there's electrical wires, there's all sorts of these other things that now create the possibility of a fire, and you put people in there who are residing there, they have to, from the city's perspective, they've got a duty to be able to fight that fire. They can't say, well, we're not going to respond to that address if you put something there. They're going to have to. But it's not accessible unless someone can tell me that you can get a fire truck down a 10-foot alley, which I'm going to imagine that you probably can't, at least not and get the doors open.
If you look, I don't know, Mr. Tanner has something too, but if you look, there is a 15-foot alley that comes up
I did
the
see
other
that.
side, right there. And the 15-foot alley, I bet the truck can go down, and it ends up right there at that location.
And both ends of that alley are accessed only by what look to be 10-foot alleys.
Mr. Tanner, I didn't know if Mr. Tanner had something.
That's just, when the talk comes of, okay, well, you want a variance, there are required findings that we have to find, and one of them deals with this issue of public safety and danger of fire. So it's specifically a finding that we have to make, so then how do we make that? I think that there are other sort of technical issues with this as far as, the definition of front lot line, I think, presupposes some of these other issues. That is, that the line, coincides with the right-of-way of an existing or dedicated public street, or where no public street exists, like here, coincides with the right-of-way line of a public or private way, if it is not dedicated, is at least 50 feet wide, or if limited exclusively to pedestrian traffic, at least 30 feet wide, which obviously this isn't.
Correct.
Isn't, and then it says, unless otherwise authorized by variance, which gets us back into the whole variance question. So, we've got a few problems that, as I'm turning these over in my head, I'm looking for some way to be able to answer them, which is the reason why I just wanted to bring it up to you.
I want to go back, not to beat proverbial dead horse, but on the easement that was granted by the condo association, is that a perpetual easement?
Yes.
And to whom is it granted?
2217 and 2215.
17, 15,
Well, 2215 and 13, the lot, sorry. The lot is, I refer to the lot as 2213, 2215, the rear of.
Okay. So it's granted to, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but it's granted to whomever owns that lot whenever.
Correct.
Okay. Any restrictions on the easement?
No.
Okay. Okay.
We're assuming that this proposed dwelling is an attached structure, which I don't believe it is. The garage, it's attached perhaps to a garage, which is an accessory structure to the properties fronting on Pratt Street. It's not a separate principal structure. The code says in order for an attached dwelling is a dwelling that is joined by another dwelling at one or more sides by an approved party wall. This doesn't meet that definition. It's really technically a detached structure. And in an R8 district, A detached structure has a minimum lot size required of 5,000 square feet. There's interior side yard setback requirements that aren't met in this case and can't be met because the lot's only 35 feet wide. So there are a number of variances needed besides just the fact that it's on an alley. One of the architect, or not the architect, but the gentleman who wrote to us on behalf of the neighbors raised that issue. He says, is the proposed house attached, detached? Site sketch is unreasonable to that issue. So that question was raised by the neighbor. I know that it's obviously a unique situation, but the board would have to decide what it is. Is it a semi-detached, is it detached, or is it attached? And each one of those has a separate set of issues. If this walkway is 3-foot walkway, as proposed on the revised drawing, basically it says an interior side yard has to be 0 or 10 feet if it's considered an attached structure. So that also would require a variance to have a building that's set back only 4 feet from the interior side property line. Lot coverage comes into play depending on what we consider the building to be. And that hasn't been determined yet. So those are the concerns that technical as they are, I think they need to be addressed.
I will do my best at summation to address and point out 15-214.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vaughn, do you have anything further to add?
Yes. I've been trying to develop this property for quite a while, and originally I know the neighborhood needs parking. And I was trying to go down that road, and when our your councilman, said he thought that was outrageous for me to consider, it kind of forced me to look at putting a house up there. When I purchased this property, it had a restaurant, so I thought that it would not have been an issue to put a structure back there at some time in the near future. And my second drawing has tried to answer some of the concerns that the neighbor had, which was the access drainage. And so I'm asking the board to look favorably on my request.
Yes, good afternoon, members of the board. My name is David Silvaker. I represent Jeff and Janelle Olds.
So we can get recorded.
I represent Jeff and Janelle Olds, who own the property at 2213 East Pratt Street, which is one of the two properties that would be most affected by the building of this structure. I think there's some things that need to be pointed out to the board that have been raised as being issues here.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, is this cross-examination or is this summation or a statement by the counsel?
My understanding was that it was improper to cross-examine, that I could only speak to the board. The board would then determine if the board wished to inquire of the petitioner.
We do allow some limited cross-examination. I mean, I believe that Mr. Lauer cross-examined to some extent anyway, the councilman. So we're certainly willing to accommodate that kind of a request.
And I would be happy to, before moving on to my own presentation for the opposition, I will then exercise the right to cross-examine.
Sure.
Mr. Vaughn, you have stated that you purchased this property and at the time there was a restaurant on it. Isn't that what you stated?
No, what I said was that when I purchased the property, it historically had a restaurant on it.
But at the time you purchased it, the restaurant was no longer there, isn't that correct?
It was a vacant lot.
And it was a one-story restaurant, wasn't it?
No, I believe it was 2 stories.
And what do you base that information?
I never saw a picture of the restaurant, and I had met, when I purchased the property, I spoke to the individual who sold it to me, and I was informed that there had been a second floor, and maybe I've been misinformed, but was when I heard there was a second floor, I assumed that it was 2 stories.
Would it surprise you if my client had spoken to some older neighbors who'd said that it was a one-story structure?
Well,
That surprise you?
then I've been misinformed.
Now, you indicated that you're very concerned about being able to use this lot in some manner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you buy this property in February of 2004?
I thought I bought it in 2000.
I'm going to show you then a deed and assignment and asked if this is when you became into title to the property.
Technically, that is correct. Mrs. Bennett was a partner of mine, and we had an agreement that when we purchased it, she purchased it, actually, I was going to buy it back from her. So I did not technically take title in my name until that date.
Okay, but you were not the record holder of the property until February 2004, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the deed and assignment indicates that the entire purchase price for not only the lot that we are now here before, but also for, it looks like 5 condominiums, and also for 2 other properties was $3,000, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're now telling the zoning board of your concern of how you're going to utilize this lot when you only paid $3,000 for not only the lot, but 2 other properties and 5 condominium units, and that's correct, isn't it?
For tax purposes, I gave Mrs. Bennett a check for $3,000.
Right, and that's the tax that you paid. In the back, we have the tax.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, also, you discussed with your counsel, apparently, using this property for a parking lot, didn't you? You testified to that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, now, I'm going to show you now from the Department of Housing and Community Development. The current use for this property right now is a vacant lot, isn't it?
Sorry?
No, I'm just saying,
That's the current legal use for this property, correct?
Yes. But I am talking to them right now.
Okay. And then, in late 2004, I'm going to show you a request that you filed and ask if you identified that. Actually, if I may, I would like to submit into the record the deed and assignment that was shown to the witness that he identified, the printout of the current allowed use of the property,
No objection, Mr. Chairman.
and this is a request for a permit for you to take action on the property, is that correct?
This one right here?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it says what it says. I was looking to see whether there were water lines and gas lines in the property.
But this is something that you pursued, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And it says that the work that you wanted to do included digging up the lot and refilling with dirt evacuation, is what it says, isn't that correct?
Well, yes, but as I recall, let's see, when was this, 2004? I don't believe we really did more than just a few feet. We didn't dig up.
Okay, I'd like to submit this into the record, if I may. You do not have any type of approval, nor did you, strike that. You don't have any approval for a parking lot in the back of that property, do you?
I was under an impression that I could park 3 cars there, and the people who have been parking there are myself and the people who are adjacent to that property.
That's not the question I asked you. I asked you if you have any permission from the city or from zoning or from anyone to have created a parking lot in the back of that property.
I was informed that I could park my cars there, and the people who rented from me without any, and maybe I was misinformed. That's why I have appointments with the city this week.
Well, who informed you could do that?
Well, I went to zoning about in 2004. Approximately, I don't remember exactly when I went down there.
You did more than just have some parking for some people, didn't you? You rent out those spaces, don't you?
I rent out some of them. The people who rent from me do not.
We understand, we've been informed the rental price is approximately $80 a month. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
And there's more than 3 cars there. It's actually parking for approximately 6 cars, isn't it?
Yeah, well, 5 cars, 6 upon occasion.
Okay, so the 3 that you stated was an incorrect statement.
No, I said the people who rent from me can park there, and I had parked my cars there, but I am not in town, and I let other people take my spaces.
As long as they pay you.
That's correct.
Okay. So you're operating a little bit of a commercial venture out of that spot, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you're also asking to build this structure here, but there's no front lot for this house, is there?
What do you mean by no front lot?
I mean, the zoning code requires a front lot, doesn't it? Are you aware of that?
You have front lot line?
Front lot line, correct. Are you aware of that?
I'm not.
Maybe I can refresh it, that the house must be on an existing street or a public or private right-of-way, at least 50 feet wide. Are you aware of that?
When I went down to attempt to get a building permit for them, I showed them the property that I had, and they told me that I was not entitled because of the 10-foot alleyway, and if I wanted to build something there, I had to go for a variance.
Okay, so that's one of the things that you're asking the board to give you a variance for then?
That's correct.
And then are you also aware that as far as the yard, that, and I'm referring to section 4-1107, and for the board, I apologize, I was referring moments ago to 1-156. We're now at yards, 4-1107, that there's a minimum for the side and rear yards required for a home. Are you aware of that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I will read it to you and ask if you were aware. That for each principal permitted use in an R8 district, a front yard, 2 side yards, and a rear yard must be provided with the following minimum depths. And the interior side has a 10-foot depth, and the rear has a 25-foot. Are you aware of those?
I was aware of the 25, I wasn't aware of
the 10. So
10.
you're asking then for variances for both of those issues?
Is the 10-foot a requirement for one that is not detached?
It says 10 foot for detached and semi-detached structures and for ends of groups. You've now stated that you're going to have a walkway, which I would assume at best makes it a semi-detached home. So you would have to have a 10-foot interior side. And I think you've provided for a 3-foot interior side.
That is correct.
So that's another issue for variance request. We've already discussed 1-198, which I think you've conceded that the front yard, you don't have a front lot line at this time. So you're asking for a variance from that. Is that correct? Because you're not on a public, existing street or a public or private right-of-way.
I guess I am, or will be.
Are you also asking for a variance from the requirements of section 4-1106, which is the lot area and coverage for a single-family detached dwelling of 5,000 square feet?
I was not aware that I needed a 5,000 square foot lot to build what I'm asking for, but you're telling me that I am required to?
That is my understanding. I'm sure the board has a better understanding of the requirements than I do, or Mr. Tanner, of course. But that appears to be, says, and I'll read it to you, each principal permitted in an R8 district must comply with the following requirements for minimum lot area and for the maximum percentage of a lot that may be covered by structures. And it says single-family detached dwellings, 5,000 square feet.
So be it.
Okay, so that would be another request with respect to a variance. And then we have the issue of the parking space, 10-306, accessible from a 15.5-foot wide alley, and of course, it's 10 feet. So it's another requested variance that you would have to get from the board. Now, I'm going to also discuss with you the requirements of section 15-219, which are the requirements that this board must find in order to grant your variance. The first is, I'm going to refer you to subsection 3. It says the purpose of the variance is not based exclusively on a desire to increase the value or income potential of the property. Can you tell us why you are here today? What is your purpose, other than to make money off this lot? Do you have any other purpose?
No.
Number 4 says, the variance will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity or substantially diminish and impair property values in the neighborhood. My client is under the belief that your building that structure will reduce the value of their home and affect their enjoyment. Would you think that they're wrong?
Yes,
And tell us why.
because right now they're just looking at a bare lot. And I build a house that will be attractive and it will be, I think, far more pleasing to look at that than it would be to look at the alleyway. And they'll be looking over a nice yard.
But then then beyond the yard, a few feet would be a large wall, wouldn't there?
What do you
Be
mean?
a 30-foot wall, is that correct?
Well, I don't describe a house as a wall, the back of a house.
But to them, it would be a wall. They would be looking at the wall, the back wall of the house. And in fact, without any prior notice to my clients or the neighbors, you're now proposing a 3-foot structure for the entire rear of the property, whereas before it was 2 foot and then 3 foot. So that is a change that you've requested.
Repeat that again?
If I understood Mr. Lauer correctly, the entire structure will now be 30 feet in the back.
That's correct.
Wasn't it before that a 2-foot structure immediately behind my client's property and 3 foot beyond, on the property behind,
You mean 3-story?
3-story, I'm sorry, yes, 3-story.
Yes.
Okay. So you're today adding another story right behind my client's property?
I am increasing it, but I am also taking out a 3-foot walkway for their use in case of a fire.
All right, I don't know if you're aware, my client is a firefighter and a paramedic, I think you know that. And he advises me that 5 feet is required for ADA access. Did you consider the ADA requirements of the walkway that you're proposing along the side of the property?
No, I did not know about that requirement.
One of the other things that's required, a finding of 15219, is that it will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to the adjacent property. And you heard a recitation from a letter of my client's wife where she commented on the effect that it would have on air passing from south of her to their property, and also light. Do you believe that the 3-story structure will not impair the light and air to my client's property?
Well, I'm not sure which way the wind's blowing, but obviously there's something 20 feet in front of their house. It will do something, the wind won't be blowing in the same direction, and I don't know, perhaps some of the light, but they will still be getting lots of light because there's 2-story structures on one side and there's a garage on the other side, so that I feel that the light that might be restricted will be minimal.
It also requires, as a finding of the board, that the land will not become overcrowded. Wouldn't you think that putting this structure where none other like it exists on that entire area would overcrowd at least this particular parcel?
Well, the whole city of Baltimore is overcrowded, if you want to look at it that way.
And I don't know if you responded to the chairperson's question on the danger of fire. Do you believe in increased danger not only to the neighbors, but primarily to the potential occupants of a fire at that location?
Well, if there's nothing there, the chances of fire are 0 unless you have someone who turns it into a place for people to sleep at night who don't have a home and they light their own fire. But obviously, if there is a house there, there is an increased opportunity for fire, but I will say that it will be brand new, so I would think that the chances of a fire from that structure would be a lot less than a building that is, buildings that are 60, 70, 80 years old.
But the question is, what about the occupants of that house?
What about the occupants?
Wouldn't they be in greater danger than, say, an occupant that's living on East Pratt Street?
Because they won't be able to get the fire hoses there?
Because of all of the, not only the fire hoses, but potentially ladders or any other safety equipment that may be needed from a fire truck.
Well, I mean, if they have to walk 15 feet to put their ladders up, I mean, it's not perfect, but I certainly think they could put out a fire there very easily.
You had mentioned, with respect to that 9 out of 10 times they park the truck on Madeira and run a hose. Have you seen them ever do that?
I've seen fire trucks respond to Madeira, incidents on Madeira, and they do park there, and then they run the fire hoses from wherever the hydrants are. So the hydrants are, I mean, you know, they're not in front of the house that they're.
Oh, but you've seen it at least 10 times, I guess.
I'm sorry, what?
You've seen it then at
No,
least 10 times?
if I said it was merely a figure of speech.
Okay. And of course, it goes without saying there will not be a sidewalk in front of this house. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there'll be no curb cut.
And are you aware of the issue that was brought up concerning BGE getting its services to the occupants at 2213 East Pratt Street?
I heard that remark.
Had you been aware of that before?
No. They could easily come right across the garage that is right adjacent to 2213.
have no further questions. Thank you.
We do have a photograph from 1984, an appeal that was before the board for the tavern to expand into the property at 2211 for a beer garden, enclosed beer garden and kitchen. But just for everyone's interest, we do have a photograph, and I have the plat that was attached. It was a two-story
Oh, it was?
It's clear on that photograph that it was two-story. That's all.
Chairman, I have two other witnesses, if I could.
Okay.
Just your name for the record?
Mark J. Adams,
And your address, please?
209 South Chester Street, 21231.
Okay, and it's your testimony.
I've known Mr. Vaughn for probably 25 years, before he moved to Baltimore. And we kind of lost touch, and I heard his voice, which was very distinguishable, on Election Day at the polling place. I said, good God, he's moved to Baltimore. He's done a number of houses in the neighborhood, including 2 on my block. And I have to say that he did an exemplary job with the 2 houses he did. One was a rehab. The one next to it was an empty lot where a previous developer had collapsed the building. And he built what probably is the nicest house on the block in that lot. And he was very accommodating in that project because the house next to it, someone collapsed the sidewall of that house onto his lot. And he let them sort out their issues, and actually, I remember this sitting here, built a tent over the foundation and had to pipe heat into it so that the concrete would cure because they delayed him into the wintertime. I know this lot fairly well. Mr. Vaughn called me a few years ago and said, I want to put a parking lot there. Do you think I'll get any opposition? I said, I don't think anyone's going to oppose parking in this neighborhood. And as you've heard, they went to Councilman Kraft. He told them he would not put an ordinance in. I have some experience with the councilman in this respect because I brought a developer in from out of town to try to do a large lot parking structure on a lot in the district, and Councilman Kraft spoke with their representatives, and they went back to Boston. So it's obvious that Councilman Kraft doesn't want to provide us with parking. A couple of factual questions. This alley actually has been renamed Claremont Street in the block where I live. They built 6 houses at Pratt and Chester. They put 3 houses in the backyard. They have virtually no yards. They didn't get a variance. It may have something to do with the fact that the developer was a former deputy commissioner at HCD, but in any event, they put these 3 houses there, and they say, what are we going to call them because we don't have any numbers on Chester Street. So they named the alley Claremont Street on that block. And if you pull up a Google map, it actually says Claremont Street on that alley 2 blocks away. That's one factual issue. The other is I talked to an old timer, and when I told him what I was coming here for, he said, oh, that's Tally's Bar in the Alley. I said, okay. He knew the lot. He was in the beverage business before he retired. So, and Mr. Vaughn's a good guy. He did good work on my block.
Any questions?
Mr. Vaughn's been your friend for many, many years, isn't that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And you don't live in the immediate area of this property, do you?
I'm about 2 blocks away. And I checked from my back window. If I had a roof deck, I probably would see it, but I don't have a roof deck. That's one vanity that I never pursued.
And what motivated you to come here today?
Because Mr. Vaughn asked me about the parking. They told him he couldn't do parking. I think he's entitled to some use of his lot. It's not really appropriate for a bird sanctuary. It's a little small. And we have 130 acres of free space, maybe 200 feet away at Patterson Park.
Are you being compensated for being here today?
No. And Mr. Vaughn can buy me a bottle of wine if he wants. He's got very good taste. And Why?
No further questions.
Thank you.
One other witness, Mr. Chairman. Identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Laura Irwin. I am the Secretary of Fells Prospect Community Association. After we had the last hearing and it was postponed, I went and set up a meeting with Jeff Veal. I spoke to Mr. Veal about the situation. I was looking for ways to fight the placement of a house on this property. Mr. Veal gave me a couple of ideas on how to handle this situation. And we thought that they were going to come in and have a theory that if there weren't any other uses, we were going to say, oh, well, you're using it for parking. But without an ordinance, you can't legally use it for parking. When we were told about this, we actually called Mr. Kraft's office, and he confirmed that he will not, 100% will not, present an ordinance for the property.
Why?
I've gotten 3 different answers, none of them in writing. I pressed him to give me one in writing, and his in-writing statement was that it was complicated, too complicated to put in a written statement.
Okay. Did you get answers otherwise?
Runoff was one of them, and I had made a suggestion. I had written actually a letter to Mr. Kraft. Basically, I said a house would have the same amount of runoff as the parking lot. He had
As I
written...
understand, it's a paved lot as it is.
That's correct. And he did state that he wants it to stay the same, but he won't present the ordinance for it.
Okay.
Okay? In addition, I had said the house would be the same runoff-wise. He said it would set a precedence for the southeast as far as parking lots. I recommended that when he present the ordinance that he put a couple things in there that, 1, nothing had to be demoed, 2, no one has lived there for at least 10 years. So people aren't demoing a property to make it into a parking lot for a profit. And 3, that it's an unusable lot. Essentially, the size of the lot makes it fairly unusable for other things. We don't want a home, okay? Fells Prospect, we rescinded that letter. We have a new letter on file. I'm not exactly sure why it's not in the file. But basically, once we found out all of this information, we rescinded our letter, and we basically stated that we do not want a house there, okay? But we would rather have parking. But if the parking isn't supported by the councilman, and if he can't do it legally, he kind of has a right to do something with his property. And if there has to be a single-family dwelling there, we want it to meet CHAP approval and fit in with the neighborhood. Mr. Veal also told me, as far as that 10-foot thing on parking, he told me to stop putting it in letters, take it out, unless you want us to come into your neighborhood and start going after it. There isn't a 15-foot alley in our neighborhood except for the one that's perpendicular to this, and almost all of them have parking on them. Okay. As far as the fire department, I actually did call the fire marshal, and I was asking them questions, trying to get an idea of what they follow, and they follow the International Residential Code. And it's my belief that maybe we should just get their approval on that, if that's something that's of concern. About the fire trucks fitting in there.
Mm-hmm.
There are homes on 10-foot streets in the city of Baltimore.
Okay.
That's it.
Yes, I'm just trying to understand your position. You're saying that you do not want a house there. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And you understand that we're all here because the petitioner is asking for a variance to place a house there. Do you understand that, right?
Yes, Mr. Vaughn is willing to have a parking lot there instead of a house. But if it cannot be supported by Mr. Kraft, he cannot have a parking lot. He's in a bad situation.
If I understand your testimony correctly, ma'am, you testified that personally, and I think your organization would desire for there not to be a house at this location.
Correct.
But that if a parking lot is not something which is supported by the councilman, and such that a parking lot, which would be your preference to be located there, could be located there, then in that case, because you believe that there would be no other economic use for the property, then the applicant should be allowed to construct a house there so they get some sort of economic return. Does that sort of sum it up?
Yes, that does sum it up.
Why is it that you're concerned about Mr. Vaughn's economic benefit arising out of that property?
If I owned a piece of land, I would want to be able to profit from that piece of land if I chose to do so. And I find it insulting otherwise.
Now, you're here as a representative of Fells Prospect, is that correct?
I have told you what Fells Prospect's opinion is. What I just said to you there, that's my personal opinion. I can't say that Fells Prospect would feel the same way as far as.
So you are not here as a representative of Fells Prospect, is that correct?
I am here as a representative in the sense of letting you know that we rescinded the letter and what Fells Prospect, what we stated.
No, that's not my question. My question is, are you a representative?
I am.
So you're saying that what you're saying then has been approved by the Fells Prospect people?
It has been approved by the board.
And did the board approve your coming here and speaking on behalf of the board?
Myself and Eddie's over there on that side.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Yes, I believe there's some individuals that want to testify.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Jeff Amaris. I'm here on behalf of Councilman Kraft on his community aid. I'm here just to clarify a point that was made earlier in the meeting. Sure, it's Jeffrey, Jeffrey, Amaris, Amoros. And I'm here simply to clarify the point Councilman Kraft made earlier in the meeting regarding the parking lot ordinance. He said specifically at this hearing that it is open for discussion. He did not say that it was off the table. He said specifically in front of this board it was open for discussion. That's all. Thank you.
I think I do recall him saying that.
Just wanted to emphasize it.
Mr. Chairman, based on that, if that's what we're talking about, I would like a continuance of this. So, excuse me? So that we can have that discussion and the board is not faced with that decision, because that's not the information my client had, that's not the information the community was told, that's not the information I was told. So if we get a continuance, this whole thing may go away.
Ordinarily, when we get requests for continuances, they're at the beginning of hearings, not an hour and a half in. And we tend to, at least I do, I don't want to speak for everyone else, tend to not really like those sorts of requests.
I understand, Mr.
Because it
Chairman.
makes the rest of the time that's been spent a little bit wasted. That said, I think that this is a situation that's, at least seems to me, to be a little bit peculiar, in that I did hear the councilman's testimony. I did hear his statement as far as that he was willing to have a dialogue about other potential uses. Now, I don't know that he particularly said that parking was on the table. I think that he said that he was willing to talk about other potential uses, and the allusion, at least as I understood it, was that that was a reference to parking, but he wasn't specific on that. The testimony from the representative of the Fells Prospect Association is that they're supportive of parking, and they do not want to see housing here, but that if parking isn't something that's possible, then they'll give in to the housing issue. Whether or not, I mean, the testimony was that she was here and her statements were authorized by the board, which then creates an issue of, well, I think that that's sufficient. I certainly don't know anything that's different. And and I think that the applicant has testified that he would want to pursue parking at this location, but has been frustrated by his lack of progress in getting a result towards that end, intervening with the councilman's office. And at the same time, yet, we have invested a fair amount of time at this point. So I am a bit frustrated by the request for a continuance, but I understand the context in which it's made, and I can understand that the opposition, why they're opposed to it, because they don't want to feel like their time here has been wasted. But I guess we'll deliberate on the request.
Chairman, can I ask a question before we do?
Yes.
Just to Mr. Vaughn, just out of curiosity, has there been any consideration to just subdividing these lots and selling that property to the owner of 1513 or 2213? Has that ever been a consideration as a potential use?
No, come speak in the record.
I didn't know that I was able to subdivide that lot.
I think they mean consolidated.
Or yeah, whatever the process is. Yes, unsubdivided.
2213 had requested, asked if I was interested in selling it, and they came, I said I would consider it, and they came back to me with a price which I felt I'd rather attach it to my own house than before it.
Out of curiosity.
May I have one word before
Yes.
you? The opposition is confused.
Mm-hmm.
We understood this hearing to be concerning the construction of a home, not parking. We have no idea why there would be any continuance to pursue parking when that's not even at issue here.
Well, as I understand the situation from the applicant, as they've testified to it, as well as the testimony that's been given by the representative of the Fells Prospect Association, is that both are interested primarily in parking and not housing. And housing is the second option that's being pursued because they've been told that that parking isn't something which the councilman is willing to participate in achieving. From the testimony from the councilman's aide, that is the councilman's unwillingness to achieve the end of, or the parking use, that no, he is willing to consider that, which from the standpoint of the community association, and I think the applicant, kind of changes things a bit. Now, as I said, when I heard him speak, I didn't hear him specifically say that he was interested in parking or was receptive to parking. I think he said that he was receptive to other uses. I did understand that to be a reference to parking, but to his credit, he was not specific. His aide, however, has clarified that, and for the desire of clarifying it, testified that no, he is receptive to parking. And at that point, it would make most of this sort of back and forth moot. Because I'm not sure that we would be.
And Mr.
faced
Chairman,
with
if I
that
might,
kind of-
it was his witness that came up and presented that.
That is
But
true.
wouldn't there need to be an application for the parking, which then the zoning
Well, parking is
office
a.
would respond to, and then maybe it would wind up here again, but maybe it wouldn't?
No, it doesn't wind up here,
I
Mr.
don't
Chairman.
think that it would wind up here. I think that it would. go-
City Council.
Yes, it would be.
Conditional use parking ordinance. That's a separate.
If a postponement or a continuance, a continuance, as I see it, we come back and they present their case if we come back. A continuance would give us time to talk to Councilman Kraft, as your witness testified that he's open to,
Well, I don't know if
which
you-
is
I don't know
not
if you could-
previous what we're talking about, so the board would not deal with this.
And as I said, that, ordinarily I would expect that kind of request to come at the beginning of the hearing. Because I can understand that the applicant or an applicant, if they see a number of folks opposed to what they're there for, and if the applicant is interested in doing something different that would be welcomed by many members of the community, they would probably be interested in pursuing that result. And so you typically see a request for continuance made and entertained at that time. And so, as I said, I'm a little bit frustrated, more than a little bit frustrated, that that request is coming now. However, I won't blame that on the applicant, because it sounds like there's been some sort of dialogue that's been going on between the applicant and the councilman's office for some time. And the clarification that was given by the councilman's office that he would be willing to entertain a discussion about what it sounds like the applicant is primarily interested in and what the community association is interested in. So whatever my frustration is at getting that sort of a request now, I do understand sort of how we got here, and I still see a benefit in the applicant having that discussion, to which at that point in time would remove the really, as I understand it, the whole opposition, which would, I think that if what was being presented, and it wouldn't even be here, but what was being presented to the community was available parking, I don't think that we'd have so much opposition. And I hear you as far as the request being for housing, but I think that if they get an approval to do parking, then the consideration for housing would entirely go away.
But we could resolve the housing issue, and then the parking issue would be a separate issue, rather than, it seems that it's being held over everyone's head, when, the community was hoping for a decision on that today.
And I can appreciate that, and I think that the only reason why we're there is that there appears to have been some kind of, I guess, miscommunication between the councilman's office and the applicant, such that the councilman's office saw the need to clarify where the councilman was on this issue.
Okay.
But we're gonna deliberate on this.
Thank you. We'd be excused for just a moment then.
Sure, sure. Hmm? Off the record, right.
I've been told already the answer. I think the response on the record was simply a dodge, for lack of a better term, to not give a straight answer to him in front of all of us. I don't think he's gonna change his mind. I think he's already made his decision. It's just my opinion. Yeah, but he's playing politics at the expense of our time. Well, I know it's up on the highway, it's just not mine. Because it's, who's been gardening?
Yeah, but I think it's economic use.
Yes.
Well, but, you know, I know it's fault down.
It's what's your market back expectation?
Well, but I also asked the question, would you consider selling it to the resident? And he said the residents offer wasn't enough. And that's not for us to decide what's enough, but an offer was made. I was just looking for a compromise. But he's gonna say, but there's no way the residents want us to arrest us by putting an ordinance into for parking. Well, the point of deliberations are, outnumbered.
Okay. We're going to go back on the record. All right, so we've deliberated on the request for a continuance. It's going to be granted. What we will do is, we're not going to hold this open for forever. It's been postponed once. I think that it's probably appropriate, I'm going to say 30 days, so not the next hearing date, but it would be the hearing date after that. So 4 weeks.
Okay.
David, do you have any idea as far as what we're looking at on, let's see here, that would be May the 5th, how we're looking for that document? All right. So we'll be back here on May the 5th. That's what the continuance is going to be for. If you have a discussion, you find out that progress is being made and then councilman or whomever needs more time, then you can make the board and the opposition aware of it at that point in time, hopefully before then. but as of right now, we'll schedule to continue to come back on May the 5th. And you've only put on one witness at that point, at this point. who's-
Mr. Chairperson, may I call my office just to make sure I'm
Yes,
available?
yes, yes. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Is it too late to testify on behalf of the councilman? I just got off the phone with him.
Yeah.
He just does not support the continuance. He thinks that this issue should be settled right here and now, and that the issue of
Alright.
parking is not related to.
Okay, ma'am, if you could come forward and identify yourself for the record.
Hi, my name is Emily Sherman. I'm Councilman Kraft's chief of staff. I just got off the phone with him. He's been watching from home. He says he does not support the continuance of this. He believes that this issue should be settled today and that parking is a separate issue that can be discussed at another time.
Okay. Okay, I hear him on that. And if,
Sorry, not to clarify, parking any use of that lot for a better use other than the house, whatever it may be.
okay, and if that's the case, then we'll pick back up on May 5th. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going off the record.
I think he's still,
Oh, yes.
yeah, he's still checking with his
Don't
office.
leave yet.
Yes.
Can I clarify one statement that you just made, just for the record? You had just said it was postponed once. It has now been postponed 3 times. Started in December, January, and at the last meeting, my name is Margaret Peterson. I'm
Yeah, we're not on the
so
record.
land use. At the last meeting, it was clearly stated that this was not going to be pushed again, and this was to be made a decision today. So a lot of us, again, took off work, did everything because of that. Now, I do understand that this does add another level, but what you just stated a little while ago is in 2004, he did already try this. The city said no for parking. He's gone to houses. And me personally, as the neighbors do, we feel like he's using the system at this point to continue this.
Well,
Well, remember,
He
he
did.
can't do anything with that lot without our approval, so he's
Oh, I do know
not
that.
building anything.
Oh, I do know that.
And-
We're all
I'm not on the
being
record.
very-
Yes, we
Yeah,
know
we're-
that.
we're off
We
the
know
record.
that, you're
She's not
not.
on the record.
Yeah, we're all,
I
we're all.
didn't know if I was, but it's the fact that he did just say we've already been postponed once, we've been postponed 3 times.
And I do appreciate that. And I don't think that, that
Don't leave
the,
yet. Don't leave yet.
yeah, we have to, do you know if you're clear, council, for the 5th?
Okay.
Okay, all right, we are clear for the 5th.
Thank you.
Do you want to clarify where we're going to pick up?
It's also, it's not a postponement, it's a continuance.
Yes, it is a continuance, and we're going to pick up with the, with the opposition. And I do understand as far as the concern about timing. I don't think that the I don't think that the applicant's request for a continuance was one, certainly it wasn't one that arose before the councilman's office clarified what the councilman's position was.
It has arisen every conversation I've heard prior, and it was just told no, so we continued to the house. But I do understand, I just wanted to make sure that
And,
we were all clear on the multiple, like they've been giving multiple and ample times to do any of this.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we need to. deliberate.
I didn't have any to.
The one on Decker, that's a weird one with the part that's over the, part of the deck that's over the sidewalk. It's a request for a deck over, what is it, 40 some odd feet? 41. Decker? I guess now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but where we've had issues in the past, decks being above the 35-foot threshold is, where the base of the deck is at or below 35 feet, and the only thing that's projecting above it is the safety rail. Because the safety rail is something that's required by code, we sort of give them a credit for that, and then we say that, well, there's no, they're, that they're under 35 feet. Here, they're already above it, to start off with.
I would say that the majority of them are that way.
Yeah.
I imagine there's been a few that were above 35 foot that the board has made a decision on, but primarily that's the issue.
All right. Now you're gonna make me have to go back and find it then. Yeah, fortunately, it's right here.
What was the name of the other one?
Tiny little patch of enjoyment outside. Because the house happens to be a little higher.
No, I see why they want it.
Oh.
Because
Yeah,
they're
they're-
blocked by this thing.
Yeah, they're not gonna, they're gonna keep it set back from the front. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, neither they nor Lisa's case made any case for a variance.
Variance,
That is,
yes.
didn't, but, you know.
All right, why did I have a question here on Ash Street? 73?
I don't think I didn't see anything unusual on that,
Yeah,
other than the
yeah.
width of the lot
Yeah.
prohibits the side yard.
I kind of wonder why I got a question mark there. I don't even remember.
I thought we would have some opposition, and we didn't.
Or trash.
Yeah.
I think here's a big issue. That's why he said, this is on his property, here's the property line.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got this retaining wall that he doesn't wanna move, so he
Yeah.
can't really go this
Yeah.
way at all.
Yeah, okay, I can't figure out why I had a question there, so. Okay, those were the only two I had questions about.
The one with the height, the only comment I had was,
Pretty consistent with these neighbors, they're all.
the house, the building next to them is even higher, but it's a multiple dwelling, and they have a different height regulation based on FAR.
There are, yes.
35 feet.
I think though we should, even though it is subject to minor privilege, we should say that in our
Mhm.
approval, so
Yes.
we can't try to take what we give him and run with it.
Yes, because
But
these
if you-
builders seem to be totally clueless.
Oh, yeah.
about that.
If you looked at the picture of that building, they've got some protrusions right
Yeah.
now that probably they needed to get
Mhm,
minor
mhm.
privileges for and probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was hard to communicate with.
Yeah.
The builder, not the
Right.
applicant.
Okay. Ready? All right, 2014-538, rear of 2213 through 15 East Pratt Street is continued. We'll pick up with presentation by the opposition. 2014-557, 1625 Thames Street was postponed. 2015-30, 5005 through 7 York Road. I'm a yes.
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 Yes, with all the listed, the things that were listed as prohibitions.
Provisions, yes, that's right. Need to incorporate in the agreement with the community association. 2015-38, 3315 Pulaski Highway was by consent with planning department conditions. 2015-43, 877 North Howard Street was by consent with planning department conditions. 2015-55, 3507 through 9 Woodland Avenue, and 2015-56, 3503 through 05 Woodland Avenue was by consent, and as revised to with a request to consolidate the lots. 2015-57, 821 South Dean Street was by consent. 2015-59, 326 South Broadway was postponed. 2015-60, 35 South Carlton Street was by consent. 2015-61, 711 South Clinton Street was by consent. 2015-62, 500 East Lexington Street was by consent. The Planning Department conditions. 2015-63, 510 East Lexington Street was by consent with Planning Department conditions and should be revised to be with 4 antennas and to delete the request for equipment to be co-located. 2015-64, 1018 South Decker Street, South Decker Avenue. I'm a yes.
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 Subject to the minor
Privilege, yes.
may be needed.
2015-65, 4500 York Road was by consent with Planning Department conditions and also incorporating agreement reached with the Community Association. 2015-66, 119 South Chapel Street was by consent. 2015-68, 518 South Rose Street was by consent. 2015-69, 40 North Streeper Street was not posted and was a no-show and be dismissed. 2015-70, 1928 Fleet Street. I'm a yes with Planning Department conditions and with the limitation to outdoor table service stopping at 10 p.m. for all days of the week.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm a yes with an all pork menu.
They had an all bacon appetizer.
That's how I said- I did see that, yeah.
I'll be finding that place.
2015-71, 2510 Robb Street. It's a no-show and be dismissed. 2015-72, 107 through 11 West Heath Street. It's by consent with Planning Department conditions and should be revised to be 12 antennas instead of 7. 2015-73, 3505 through 07 Ash Street. I'm a yes. Yes.
Yes.
2015-74, 938 South Clinton Street. It's by consent. 2015-77, 2222 Jefferson Street was by consent. 2015-89, 346 Dennison Street. I'm a yes. Did we want to incorporate anything about time and ages and that kind of stuff? She said that she was going to do it ages 2 to 5 and time 6:30 to 7.
I should just put something about following up with Department of Transportation.
Right,
What
I don't have an
priorities are.
issue with time or ages. I don't wanna be that restrictive.
Yeah, and as
But
far as
loading and unloading.
she said, that would be, I guess, yeah, we should incorporate. She said that that would be in the parking lot that's located. So, Martin, is that sufficient for your purposes? Okay, so with maintenance of picking up and drop off in the parking lot located at the premises.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All righty.
Over or under of this continuance being